Appointment with Death by Agatha Christie. Read by Bull McKenna. You do see, don't you, that she's got to be killed? The question floated out into the still night air, seemed to hang there for a moment, and then drift away down into the darkness towards the Dead Sea. Hercule Poirot paused with his hand on the window catch, then he shut it decisively, thereby excluding any injurious night air. Hercule Poirot had been brought up to believe that all outside air was best left outside, and that night air was especially dangerous to the health. As he walked to his bed, he smiled tolerantly to himself. You do see, don't you, that she's got to be killed? Curious words for one Hercule Poirot detective to hear on his first night in Jerusalem. Decidedly, wherever I go, there is something to remind me of crime, he murmured to himself. He wondered what had occasioned the words he had just overheard. A collaboration, perhaps, over a play or a book? He smiled. Those words might be remembered one day and given a more sinister meaning. There had been, he now recollected, a curious nervous intensity in the voice, a tremor that spoke of some intense emotional strain. A man's voice, or a boy's? Hercule Poirot thought to himself as he turned out the light by his bed. I should know that voice again. Their elbows on the windowsill, their heads close together, Raymond and Carol Boynton gazed out into the blue depths of the night. Nervously, Raymond repeated his former words. You do see, don't you, that she's got to be killed? Carol Boynton stirred slightly. She said, her voice deep and hoarse, It's horrible. It's not more horrible than this, Raymond said violently. It can't go on like this. We must do something. If we could get away somehow. We can't. His voice was empty and hopeless. Carol, you know we can't. He gave a short, bitter laugh. People would say we were crazy not to be able just to walk out. Carol said slowly, Perhaps we are crazy. I dare say. Yes, I dare say we are. Anyway, we soon shall be. I suppose some people would say we are already. Calmly planning in cold blood to kill our own mother. Carol said sharply, She isn't our own mother. No, that's true. There was a pause, and then Raymond said, You see why it's got to be one of us, don't you? With Lennox, there's Nadine to consider, and we couldn't bring Ginny into it. Carol shivered. Poor Ginny. I'm so afraid. I know. It's getting pretty bad. That's why something's got to be done quickly before she goes right over the edge. Ray, Carol said, you don't think it's really wrong, do you? No. I think it's just like killing a mad dog. Something that's doing harm in the world and must be stopped. Carol murmured, But they'd send us to the chair just the same. Nobody will ever know, Raymond said. We shall be quite safe. I've got a plan. He bent his head to hers. Miss Sarah King, M.B., stood by the table in the writing room of the Solomon Hotel in Jerusalem, idly turning over the papers and magazines. A tall middle-aged Frenchman who entered the room from the hall watched her for a moment or two before strolling up to the opposite side of the table. When their eyes met, Sarah smiled in recognition. She had been traveling from Cairo, and the man had carried one of her suitcases when no porter appeared to be available. They exchanged greetings. I was about to order some coffee, he said. You will join me, Miss King, Sarah King. And mine, Darmikmi. He whipped out a card. Taking it, Sarah's eyes widened in delighted awe. Dr. Theodore Scherer. Oh, I am excited to meet you. I've read all your works, of course. Your views on schizophrenia are frightfully interesting. Of course. Gerard's eyebrows rose inquisitively. Sarah explained rather diffidently, "You see, I'm by way of being a doctor myself. Just got my M.B. "Ah, I see." Dr. Gerard ordered coffee, and they sat down in a corner of the lounge. "You are staying here long?" he asked. "A few days, that is all. Then I want to go to Petra." "Ah, I too. I must go to the travel bureau in the morning and see what can be arranged." A party of people entered the lounge and sat down. Sarah watched them with some interest. She lowered her voice. "Those people who have just come in, did you notice them on the train the other night? They left Cairo the same time as we did." Dr. Gerard screwed in an eyeglass and directed his glance across the room. "Americans?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, an American family, but rather an unusual one, I think." "How unusual?" "Well, look at them, especially at the old woman." Dr. Gerard complied. He noticed first a tall, rather loose-boned man, age about 30. His face was pleasant but weak, and his manner seemed oddly apathetic. Then there were two good-looking youngsters. The boy had almost a Greek head. "Something the matter with him, too," thought Dr. Gerard. "Yes, a definite state of nervous tension." The girl was clearly his sister, a strong resemblance, and she was also in an excitable condition. There was another girl, younger still, with golden red hair that stood out like a halo. She was sitting, smiling to herself, a strange, unearthly smile. But in the shelter of her lap, her hands were tearing a delicate handkerchief into tiny shreds. Yet another woman, young, calm, dark-haired, with a creamy pallor, a placid face, not unlike a Luini Madonna. Nothing jumpy about her. And the center of the group. Heavens, thought Dr. Gerard with a Frenchman's candid repulsion. What a horror of a woman! Old, swollen, bloated, sitting there immovable in the midst of them, a distorted old Buddha, a gross spider in the center of a web. To Sarah he said, "La maman, she is not beautiful, eh? Dropsy, cardiac?" he added, scrutinizing the old woman with a professional eye. "Who are they, do you know?" "Their name is Boynton. Mother, married son, his wife, one younger son, and two younger daughters." Dr. Gerard murmured, "La famille Boynton sees the world." "Yes, but there's something odd about the way they're seeing it," said Sarah. "They never speak to anyone else, and none of them can do anything unless the old woman says so." "She is of the matriarchal type," said Gerard thoughtfully. "She's a complete tyrant, I think," said Sarah. Dr. Gerard shrugged and remarked that the American woman ruled the earth. That was well known. "Yes, but it's more than just that," Sarah was persistent. She's got them all so cowed that it's indecent." Dr. Gerard shot a quick sideways glance at Sarah. She was watching the Boynton family, or rather, she was watching one particular member of it. He smiled, a quick, comprehending, Gallic smile. "Ah, so it was like that, was it?" He murmured tentatively, "You have spoken with them, yes?" "Yes, with one of them." "The young man, the younger son?" "Yes, on the train coming here from Kantara. He was standing in the corridor. I spoke to him." There was no self-consciousness in her attitude to life. Sarah was interested in humanity, and was of a friendly, though impatient disposition. "I got the impression," she said slowly, "that he was, how shall I put it, both excited and appalled. Excited out of all proportion, and quite absurdly apprehensive at the same time. That's odd, isn't it, because he must be over 20. Dr. Gerard nodded. "About 23 or 4, I should say." "As much as that?" Sarah was surprised. "Only, somehow he seems very young." "Maladjustment mentally. The child factor persists." "Then I am right. I mean, there is something not quite normal about him." Dr. Gerard smiled. "Oh, my dear young lady, are any of us quite normal? But I grant you that there is probably a neurosis of some kind. Connected with that horrible old woman, I'm sure." "You seem to dislike her very much," said Gerard, looking at her curiously. "I do. She's got a malevolent eye." Gerard murmured, "So have many mothers when their sons are attracted to fascinating young ladies." Sarah shrugged an impatient shoulder. Frenchmen were all alike, she thought, obsessed by sex. Raymond Boynton rose and crossed the room to the centre table, where he selected a magazine. As he passed Sarah's chair on his return journey, she said, "Have you been busy sightseeing today?" She selected her words at random. Her real interest was to see how they would be received. Raymond half stopped, shied like a nervous horse, and his eyes went apprehensively to the centre of his family group. He muttered, Oh, yes. Why, yes, certainly. Then, as suddenly as though he had received the prick of a spur, he hurried back to his family, holding out the magazine. The grotesque Buddha-like figure held out a fat hand for it, but as she took it, her eyes, Dr. Gerard noticed, were on the boy's face. She gave a grunt, certainly no audible thanks, her face quite impassive. Sarah looked at her watch. "It's much later than I thought," she exclaimed. She got up. "Thank you so much, Dr. Gerard, for sending me coffee. I must write some letters now." He rose and took her hand. "We shall meet again, I hope," he said. "Oh, yes. Perhaps you will come to Petra." "I shall certainly try to do so." Sarah smiled at him and turned to go. Her way out led her past the Boynton family. Dr. Gerard, watching, saw Mrs. Boynton's gaze shift to her son's face. He saw the boy's eyes meet hers. As Sarah passed, Raymond Boynton half turned his head, not towards her, but away from her. It was a slow, unwilling motion, and conveyed the idea that old Mrs. Boynton had pulled an invisible string. Sarah King noticed the avoidance, and was young enough and human enough to be annoyed by it. They'd had such a friendly talk together in the swaying corridor of the Wagon-Lit. And now, for no reason at all, he was shy, boorish, positively rude. "I shan't take any more trouble with him," she said indignantly to herself. Instead of writing the letter she had mentioned, Sarah sat down in front of her dressing table and thought again of the strange, boorish young American. She had no doubt that it was the presence of his family which had caused him to react in such a peculiar manner, but she felt slightly scornful of him nevertheless. To be under the thumb of one's family like that, it was really rather ridiculous, especially for a man. And yet, surely there was something a little odd about it all. She said suddenly out loud, "That boy wants rescuing. I'm going to see to it." When Sarah had left the lounge, Dr. Gerard sat where he was for some minutes. Then he crossed to the table, picked up the latest number of Le Matin, and strolled with it to a chair a few yards away from the Boynton family. His curiosity was aroused. He overheard scraps of conversation, very ordinary, normal conversation. "We might go to Solomon's stables." "Would that be too much for Mother?" "The Wailing Wall in morning." "The temple, of course. The Mosque of Omar, they call it. I wonder why." "Because it's been made into a Muslim mosque, of course, Lennox." Ordinary, commonplace tourists' talk. And yet, somehow, Dr. Gerard felt convinced that these overheard scraps of dialogue were all singularly unreal. They were a mask, a cover for something that surged and eddied underneath, something too deep and formless for words. There was a slow, asthmatic, wheezing cough. Then the old woman spoke. "Ginevra, you're tired. You'd better go to bed." The younger girl started. "I'm not tired, Mother." Gerard recognized appreciatively the musical quality of voice that lends enchantment to the most commonplace utterances. "Yes, you are. I don't think you'll be able to do any sightseeing tomorrow." "Oh, but I shall. I'm quite all right." In a thick, grating voice, her mother said, "No, you're not. You're going to be ill." The girl began trembling violently. The quiet young woman with wide, thoughtful grey eyes rose to her feet. "I'll come with you, Ginny," she said calmly. Old Mrs. Boynton said, "No, let her go up alone." "I want Nadine to come," the girl cried. "Then of course I will." The young woman moved a step forward. "The child prefers to go by herself, don't you, Ginny?" There was a pause. Then Ginevra Boynton said, her voice suddenly flat and dull, "Yes, I'd rather go alone. Thank you, Nadine." And she moved away with surprising grace. Dr. Gerard lowered his paper and took a full, satisfying look at old Mrs. Boynton. She was looking after her daughter, and her fat face was creased into a peculiar smile. It was, very faintly, a caricature of the lovely, unearthly smile that had transformed the girl's face so short a time before. The old woman transferred her gaze to Nadine, who had just sat down again. She raised her eyes and met her mother-in-law's malicious glance. Her face was quite imperturbable. Dr. Gerard knew that alone out of the group, Nadine Boynton was unaffected by her mother-in-law's spell. What an absurdity of an old tyrant, he thought. Then suddenly, the old woman's eyes were full on him, and he drew in his breath sharply. Small, black, smouldering eyes they were, but something came from them, a power, a wave of malignancy. Dr. Gerard knew something about the power of personality. He realized that here was no spoilt, tyrannical invalid indulging petty whims. This old woman was a definite force. Dr. Gerard once met a woman who performed a most dangerous and spectacular act with tigers. The great slinking brutes had crawled to their places and performed their degrading and humiliating tricks. Their eyes and subdued snarls told of hatred, bitter hatred. But they had obeyed. That had been a young woman with an arrogant, dark beauty. But the look had been the same. Indompteuse, said Dr. Gerard to himself. And he understood now what that undercurrent to the harmless family talk had been. It was hatred. A dark, eddying stream of hatred. His dark imaginings dissipated as a man came into the lounge, caught sight of the Boyntons, and came across to them. He was a pleasant, middle-aged American of a strictly conventional type. He was carefully dressed, with a long, clean-shaven face. "I was looking around for you all," he said. Meticulously, he shook hands with the entire family. "And how do you find yourself, Mrs. Boynton? Not too tired by the journey?" Almost graciously, the old lady wheezed, "No, thank you, Mr. Cope. My health's never good, as you know. A couple of hours sightseeing is about all I can manage every day. But I don't give in to my body. It's the mind that matters." Mr. Cope said, "I hope to have done Jerusalem thoroughly in a couple more days, and then I'd very much like to have a look at the rose-red city of Petra." Carol Boynton said, "I'd love to go there. It sounds marvelous." Mr. Cope shot a somewhat dubious glance at Mrs. Boynton, and then went on in a voice that to the listening Frenchman was palpably uncertain, "I wonder now if I couldn't persuade some of you people to come with me. Naturally, I know you couldn't manage it, Mrs. Boynton, and I'm sure some of your family would want to remain with you. But if you were to divide forces, so to speak—" He paused. Gerard heard the click of Mrs. Boynton's knitting needles. Then she said, "I don't think we'd care to divide up. We're a very homey group." She looked up. "Well, children, what do you say?" There was a queer ring in her voice. The answers came promptly. "No, Mother." "Oh, no. No, of course not." Mrs. Boynton smiled. "You see, they won't leave me." She began to wind up her ball of wool. "By the way, Raymond, who was that young woman who spoke to you just now?" Raymond started nervously. He flushed, then went white. I don't know her name. She was on the train the other night." Mrs. Boynton began slowly to try to heave herself out of her chair. "I don't think we'll have much to do with her," she said. Nadine rose and assisted the old woman. She did it with a professional deftness that attracted Gerard's attention. "Bedtime," said Mrs. Boynton. "Good night, Mr. Cope." They went off. Mr. Cope was left looking after them. The expression on his face was an odd one. As Dr. Gerard knew by experience, Americans are disposed to be a friendly race. To a man of Dr. Gerard's tact, making the acquaintance of Mr. Jefferson Cope presented few difficulties. Before long, the two men had adjourned to the bar. After a couple of highballs, Gerard said, "Tell me, is that a typical American family to whom you were talking?" Jefferson Cope sipped his drink thoughtfully. "Why, no, I wouldn't say it was exactly typical." "No? A very devoted family, I thought." Mr. Cope said slowly, "You mean they all seem to revolve round the old lady? Well, that's true enough. I don't mind telling you, Dr. Gerard, that I'm just a little worried. Mrs. Boynton, you see, is an old friend of mine. Or that is to say, not the old Mrs. Boynton, the young one, Mrs. Lennox Boynton." "Ah, yes, that very charming dark-haired lady." "That's right. That's Nadine. Nadine Boynton. I knew her before she was married. She was in hospital then, training to be a nurse. Then she went for a vacation to stay with the Boyntons, and she married Lennox." Mr. Jefferson Cope took another sip of highball and went on, "I'd like to tell you, Dr. Gerard, just a little of the Boynton family history. I should be most interested." Mr. Cope began slowly. "Well, you see, the late Elmer Boynton, he was quite a well-known and a very charming personality, was twice married. His first wife died when Carol and Raymond were tiny toddlers. The second Mrs. Boynton, so I've been told, was a handsome woman when he married her, though not very young. Anyway, after Elmer died, she devoted herself absolutely to these children. There's one of her own, too, Ginevra, pretty red-haired girl, but a bit delicate. Well, Mrs. Boynton just shut out the outside world entirely. Now, I don't know what you think, Dr. Gerard, but I don't think that's always a very sound thing." The Frenchman nodded. "I agree with you. It is most harmful to developing mentalities. No doubt Mrs. Boynton meant well. It was just over-devotion on her part. But the result is, they've grown up kind of nervy." "They all live at home?" asked the doctor. "Yes." "Do neither of the sons work?" "Why, no. Elmer Boynton was a rich man. He left all his money to Mrs. Boynton for her lifetime, but it was understood that it was for the family upkeep generally. So they are dependent on her financially." "That is so," said Cope. "And she's encouraged them to live at home and not go out and look for jobs. All the same, a man who respects himself strikes out on his own and makes something of his life. He doesn't just sit around and twiddle his thumbs." Gerard looked at Jefferson Cope curiously for a minute or two. Then he said, "You refer particularly, I think, to Mr. Lennox Boynton." "Why, yes, it was Lennox I was thinking of. Raymond's only a boy still, but Lennox is just on 30. Time he showed he was made of something. It is a difficult life, perhaps, for his wife. Of course it's a difficult life for her. If I were Nadine, Dr. Gerard, I'd put it to Lennox straight. Either he sets to and proves what he's made of, or else you think she should leave him? She's got her own life to lead, Dr. Gerard. If Lennox doesn't appreciate her as she ought to be appreciated, well, there are other men who will. Yourself, for instance." The American flushed. Then he looked straight at the other with a certain simple dignity. "That's so," he said. "I respect her, and I am very deeply attached to her. All I want is her happiness. If she were happy with Lennox, I'd sit right back and fade out the picture. But as it is, I'm standing by. If she wants me, I'm here." Sarah King stood in the precincts of the temple, the Haramesh Sharif. Her back was to the dome of the rock. The splashing of fountains sounded in her ears. Little groups of tourists passed by without disturbing the peace of the oriental atmosphere. She turned and looked at the mosque, which now covered the shrine, and wondered if Solomon's temple would have looked half as beautiful. There was a clatter of footsteps, and a little party came out from the interior of the mosque. It was the Boyntons, escorted by a voluble dragoman. Mrs. Boynton was supported between Lennox and Raymond. Nadine and Mr. Cope walked behind. Carol came last. She caught sight of Sarah, hesitated, then wheeled round and ran swiftly across the courtyard. "Excuse me," she said breathlessly. I I felt I must speak to you." "Yes," said Sarah. Carol was trembling violently. Her face was quite white. "It's about my brother. When you spoke to him last night, you must have thought him very rude, but he didn't mean to be. He couldn't help it. Do please believe me. You see, my mother doesn't like us making friends outside, but I know Ray would like to be friends with you." Sarah was interested. Before she could speak, Carol went on, "I know what I'm saying sounds very silly, but we are rather an odd family." She cast a quick look round, a look of fear. "I mustn't stay," she murmured. "They may miss me." Sarah made up her mind. "Why shouldn't you stay if you want to? We might walk back together." Carol drew back. "Oh, no, my mother would be—" Sarah said, clearly and calmly, "I know it's awfully difficult sometimes for parents to realize that their children are grown up. They will go on trying to run their lives for them, but I think freedom of action is always worth fighting for." "Freedom?" Carol stared at her. "None of us have ever been free. We never will be." "Nonsense," said Sarah clearly. Carol leaned forward and touched her arm. "Listen, before her marriage, my mother, well, she's my stepmother really, was a wardress in a prison. And it's been like that ever since. She's gone on being a wardress to us. That's why her life is just being in prison." Her head jerked round again. "They've missed me. I must go." Sarah caught her by the arm as she was darting off. "1 minute. We must meet again and talk." "I can't. I shan't be able to." "Yes, you can." Sarah spoke authoritatively. "Come to my room after you go to bed. It's 319. Don't forget, 319. She released her hold, and Carol ran off after her family. Sarah stood staring after her. She awoke from her thoughts to find Dr. Gerard by her side. "Good morning, Miss King. So you've been talking to Miss Carol Boynton?" "Yes, we had the most extraordinary conversation." Sarah repeated the substance of their talk. Gerard pounced on one point. "Wardress in a prison, was she? That is significant, perhaps." Sarah said, "You mean that is the cause of her tyranny? It's the habit of her former profession?" Gerard shook his head. "No, that is approaching it from the wrong angle. She does not love tyranny because she has been a wardress. Let us say rather that she became a wardress because she loved tyranny. It was a secret desire for power over other human beings that led her to adopt that profession." His face was very grave. "There are such strange things buried deep in the unconscious. A lust for power, a lust for cruelty, a savage desire to tear and rend." Sarah shivered. "You think old Mrs. Boynton is a kind of sadist?" "I'm almost sure of it." Gerard related his conversation with Jefferson Cope. He sees the atmosphere of the Boynton family is all wrong, but he credits Mrs. Boynton with misguided devotion. Sarah said impatiently, "But why did they break away? They could." Gerard shook his head. "No, there you are wrong. They cannot. They have been in prison so long, they would all be afraid of freedom." Said Sarah. "That old woman ought to be murdered. Arsenic in her early morning tea would be my prescription." Sarah wondered whether Carol Boynton would keep her appointment that night. On the whole, she rather doubted it. She was afraid that Carol would have a sharp reaction after her semi-confidences of the morning. She was just on the point of giving her up, it was after 1 o'clock, and going to bed, when there was a tap on her door. She opened it and drew quickly back to let Carol come in. The latter said breathlessly, "I was afraid you might have gone to bed." Sarah's manner was carefully matter-of-fact. "Oh no, I was waiting for you. Have some tea, will you? It's real Lapsang Souchong." She brought over a cup. Carol had been nervous and uncertain. Now she accepted the tea and a biscuit, and her manner became calmer. "This is rather fun," said Sarah, smiling. Carol looked a little startled. "Yes," she said doubtfully, "I suppose it is." "Rather like the midnight feasts we used to have at school," went on Sarah. "I suppose you didn't go to school?" "No, we never left home. We had a governess. Different governesses, they never stayed long. Did you never go away at all? No. We've lived always in the same house. This is the first time I've ever been away. Sarah put down her cup. Are you fond of your stepmother? She asked. Slowly, Carol shook her head. She whispered in a low, scared voice, I hate her. So does Ray. We've often wished she would die. And what about your elder brother? Sarah asked. Lennox. Huh. I don't know what's the matter with Lennox. He hardly ever speaks now. He goes about in a kind of daydream. Nadine's terribly worried about him. There was a pause. Then Carol said, There was an awful fuss just over 4 years ago. You see, none of us ever go outside the house at home. I mean, we go into the grounds, but nowhere else. But Lennox did. He got out at night. He went into Fountain Springs. There was a dance going on. Mother was frightfully angry when she found out. It was terrible. And then, after that, she asked Nadine to come and stay. Nadine was a very distant cousin of Father's. She was very poor and was training to be a nurse. She came and stayed with us for a month, and she and Lennox fell in love with each other. And Mother said they'd better be married quickly and live on with us. And was Nadine willing to do that? Carol hesitated. I don't think she wanted to, but she didn't really mind. Then, later, she wanted to go away, with Lennox, of course. But they didn't go? Asked Sarah. No, Mother wouldn't hear of it. Carol paused and then said, I don't think she likes Nadine any longer. Nadine is funny. You never know what she's thinking. She tries to help Ginny, and Mother doesn't like it. Ginny is your youngest sister? Sarah asked. Yes, Ginevra is her real name. Is she unhappy too? Carol shook her head doubtfully. Ginny's been very odd lately. She frightens me sometimes. She doesn't always know what she's doing. Has she seen a doctor? No. Nadine wanted her to, but Mother said no. Suddenly Carol rose. I mustn't keep you up. It's very good of you letting me come and talk to you. You must think us a very odd family. Oh, everybody's odd, really, Sarah said lightly. Come again, will you? And bring your brother if you like. We'll do some secret plotting. I'd like you to meet a friend of mine, too, a Dr. Gerard, an awfully nice Frenchman. The colour came into Carol's cheeks. Oh, what fun it sounds! If only Mother doesn't find out. Sarah suppressed her original retort and said instead, Why should she? So, shall we say tomorrow night at the same time? Oh, yes. The day after, you see, we may be going away. Carol slipped noiselessly along the corridor. Her own room was on the floor above. She reached it, opened the door, and stood appalled on the threshold. Mrs. Boynton was sitting in an armchair by the fireplace. A little cry escaped from Carol's lips. A pair of black eyes bored into hers. Where have you been, Carol? Where have you been? A soft, husky voice with that queer, menacing undertone in it that always made Carol's heart beat with unreasoning terror. To see a Miss King, Sarah King. The girl who spoke to Raymond the other evening? Yes, Mother. Have you made any plans to see her again? Carol's lips moved soundlessly. She nodded assent. When? Tomorrow night. You are not to go. You understand? Yes, Mother. Mrs. Boynton walked slowly across the room, supporting herself on her stick. She paused in the doorway and looked back at the cowering girl. You are to have nothing more to do with this Miss King. Yes, Mother. Mrs. Boynton went out and shut the door. Carol felt sick. She dropped onto her bed, and suddenly she was shaken by a storm of weeping. It was as though a vista had opened before her, a vista of sunlight and trees and flowers. Now the black walls had closed round her once more. Can I speak to you a minute?" Nadine Boynton turned in surprise, staring into the dark, eager face of an entirely unknown young woman. "Oh, why, certainly." But as she spoke, almost unconsciously, she threw a quick, nervous glance over her shoulder. "My name is Sarah King," went on the other. Mrs. Boynton, I'm going to say something rather odd to you. I talked to your sister-in-law for quite a long time the other evening." A faint shadow seemed to ruffle the serenity of Nadine Boynton's face. "You talked to Ginevra?" "No, not to Ginevra. To Carol," said Sarah. The shadow lifted. "Oh, I see. To Carol." Nadine Boynton seemed pleased, but very much surprised. "How did you manage that?" Sarah said, "She came to my room, quite late." She saw Nadine's penciled brows rise slightly and said with some embarrassment, "I'm sure this must seem very odd to you." "No," said Nadine Boynton. "I'm very glad indeed. It is very nice for Carol to have a friend to talk to." We got on very well together." Sarah tried to choose her words carefully. "In fact, we arranged to meet again last night. But she didn't come. Then this morning she was passing through the hall. I spoke to her, and she didn't answer. Just looked at me once and then away again and hurried on." "I see." There was a pause. Sarah found it difficult to go on. Nadine Boynton said presently, "I'm sorry. Carol is a rather nervous girl." Again that pause. Sarah took her courage in both hands. "You know, Mrs. Boynton, I'm by way of being a doctor. I think it would be good for your sister-in-law not to shut herself away too much from people." Nadine Boynton looked thoughtfully at Sarah. "I see," she said. "You're a doctor. It makes a difference. You are quite right, of course, but there are difficulties. My mother-in-law is in bad health, and she has a morbid dislike of outsiders penetrating into her family circle, and I should imagine that she insisted on Carol having nothing more to do with you." "And Carol gave in?" Nadine Boynton said quietly. "Can you really imagine her doing anything else?" The eyes of the two women met. Sarah felt that behind the mask of conventional words, they understood each other. "It's all wrong," cried Sarah. Nadine did not answer. Something in her silence went home to Sarah like a cold hand laid on her heart. She thought, "This woman knows the hopelessness of it much better than I do. She's lived with it." The lift gates opened. Old Mrs. Boynton emerged. She leaned on a stick, and Raymond supported her on the other side. Sarah gave a slight start. She saw the old woman's eyes sweep from her to Nadine and back again. She'd been prepared for dislike in those eyes, for hatred even. She was not prepared for what she saw, a triumphant and malicious enjoyment. Sarah turned away. Nadine went forward and joined the other two. "So, there you are, Nadine," said Mrs. Boynton. "I forgot my drops. Get them for me." "Certainly." Nadine went upstairs and entered the sitting-room of their suite. Lennox was sitting by the window, his eyes glazed with dull misery. Nadine went into Mrs. Boynton's bedroom. From a bottle on the washstand, she carefully measured a dose into a small medicine glass, filling it up with water. As she passed through the sitting-room again, she paused. "Lennox?" It was a moment or two before he answered. Then he said, "I beg your pardon. What is it?" "Lennox, look at the sunshine. Out there. Look at life. It's beautiful. We might be out in it." Again there was a pause. "I'm sorry," he said at last. "Do you want to go out?" "Yes, I want to go out," she cried. "With you. Out into the sunshine, out into life, and live, the two of us, together." Lennox looked hunted. "Nadine, my dear, must we go into all this again?" "Yes, we must," she said. "Let us go away and lead our own life somewhere. Lennox, I love you. It's a battle between me and your mother. Are you going to be on her side or mine?" On yours," he cried. "Then do what I ask." "It's impossible." She paused. Then she said, Well, I can't make you. But I am free to go. I think I shall go. He stared up at her incredulously. He stammered, But you can't do that. Mother would never hear of it. She couldn't stop me. I can go or stay at my will. I am beginning to feel that I had borne this life long enough. Nadine, don't leave me. Don't leave me. Then come with me. He shrank back from her. I can't, I tell you. I haven't. God help me, I haven't the courage. Dr. Gerard walked into the office of Messrs. Castle, the tourist agents, and found Sarah King at the counter. She looked up and said, "Oh, good morning. I'm fixing up my tour to Petra. I've just heard you're all going after all." "Yes, I find I can just manage it. Shall we be a large party, I wonder?" "They say just 2 other women and you and me. 1 carload." "That will be delightful," said Gerard. "What news of our friends, the Boyntons?" he asked. Slowly and rather unwillingly, Sarah narrated her abortive efforts to establish contact. "Anyhow, I failed," she finished, "and they're leaving today." Outside the hotel, there was a good deal of activity going on. Several cars loaded with luggage were almost ready to depart. Lennox and Nadine Boynton and Mr. Cope were standing by a big saloon car superintending arrangements. Sarah passed them and went into the hotel. Mrs. Boynton, wrapped in a thick coat, was sitting in a chair waiting to depart. Sarah had felt that Mrs. Boynton was a sinister figure, an incarnation of evil malignancy. Now, suddenly, she saw the old woman as a pathetic, ineffectual figure. To be born with such a lust for power, such a desire for dominion, and to achieve only a petty domestic tyranny. Sarah saw an object of pity, a stupid, posturing old woman. On an impulse, she went up to her. "Goodbye, Mrs. Boynton," she said. "I hope you have a nice trip." The old lady looked at her. Malignancy struggled with outrage in those eyes. "You've wanted to be very rude to me," said Sarah. "You've tried to prevent your son and daughter making friends with me. Don't you think, really, that is all very silly and childish? You like to make yourself out a kind of ogre, but really, you know, you're just pathetic and rather ludicrous. It's really much better to be friendly and kind. You could be if you tried." There was a pause. Mrs. Boynton had frozen into a deadly immobility. At last, she passed her tongue over her dry lips. Her mouth opened. Still, for a moment, no words came. "Go on," said Sarah encouragingly. "Say it. It doesn't matter what you say to me, but think over what I've said to you." The words came, at last, in a soft, husky but penetrating voice. Mrs. Boynton's basilisk eyes looked, not at Sarah, but oddly over her shoulder. She seemed to address not Sarah, but some familiar spirit. "I never forget," she said. "Remember that. I've never forgotten anything. Not an action, not a name, not a face." There was nothing in the words themselves, but the venom with which they were spoken made Sarah retreat a step. And then Mrs. Boynton laughed. It was, definitely, rather a horrible laugh. Sarah shrugged her shoulders. "You poor old thing," she said, and turned away. As she went towards the lift, she almost collided with Raymond Boynton. On an impulse, she spoke quickly. "Goodbye. I hope you have a lovely time. Perhaps we'll meet again some day." She smiled at him and passed quickly on. Raymond stood as though turned to stone. So lost in his own thoughts was he that a small man with big moustaches, endeavouring to pass out of the lift, had to speak several times. "Pardon." At last it penetrated. Raymond stepped aside. "So sorry," he said. I was thinking." Carol came towards him. "Ray, Get Ginny, will you? We're going to start. Oh, right. I'll tell her she's got to come straight away. Raymond walked into the lift. Hercule Poirot stood for a moment, looking after him, his eyebrows raised, his head a little on one side as though he was listening. Then he nodded his head, as though in agreement. Walking through the lounge, he took a good look at Carol, who had joined her mother. Then he beckoned the head waiter who was passing. Pardon, can you tell me the name of those people over there? The name is Boynton, monsieur. They are Americans. Thank you, said Hercule Poirot. On the third floor, Dr. Gerard, going to his room, passed Raymond Boynton and Ginevra walking towards the waiting lift. Just as they were about to get into it, Ginevra said, "Just a minute, Ray. Wait for me in the lift." She ran back, turned a corner, caught up with Dr. Gerard. "Please, I must speak to you." He looked up in astonishment. The girl came up close to him and caught his arm. "They're taking me away. They may be going to kill me. I don't really belong to them, you know. My name isn't really Boynton." She hurried on, her words coming fast and tumbling over each other. "I'll trust you with the secret. I'm royal, really. I'm the heiress to a throne. That's why there are enemies all round me. They've tried to poison me, all sorts of things. If you could help me to get away." She broke off. Footsteps. "Ginny!" The girl put a finger to her lips, threw Gerard an imploring glance and ran back. "I'm coming, Ray." Dr. Gerard walked on, with his eyebrows raised. Slowly, he shook his head and frowned. It was the morning of the start to Petra. Sarah came down to find a big, masterful woman, whom she'd already noticed in the hotel, objecting fiercely to the size of the car. "A great deal too small. 4 passengers and a dragoman." In vain did the representative of Messrs. Castle raise his voice in explanation. That was the size of the car always provided. A bigger car was not suitable for desert travel. The large woman, metaphorically speaking, rode over him like a steamroller. Then she turned her attention to Sarah. "Miss King, I am Lady Westholme. I am sure you agree with me that that car is grossly inadequate as to size." "Well," said Sarah cautiously, "I agree that a larger one would be more comfortable." The young man from Castles murmured that a larger car would add to the price. "The price," said Lady Westholme firmly, "is inclusive, and I shall certainly refuse to sanction any addition to it. Your prospectus distinctly states, in comfortable saloon car. You will keep to the terms of your agreement." Recognizing defeat, the young man muttered something about seeing what he could do, and wilted away from the spot. Lady Westholme turned to Sarah, a smile of triumph on her weather-beaten countenance. She was a very well-known figure in the English political world. When Lord Westholme, a middle-aged, simple-minded peer, whose only interests in life were hunting, shooting, and fishing, was returning from a trip to the United States, one of his fellow passengers was a Mrs. Van Sittart. Shortly afterwards, Mrs. Van Sittart became Lady Westholme. The match was often cited as one of the examples of the danger of ocean voyages. The new Lady Westholme forced her husband pitilessly into public life. It being borne in upon her, however, that politics were not Lord Westholme's métier, and never would be, she graciously allowed him to resume his sporting activities, and herself stood for Parliament. Being elected with a substantial majority, Lady Westholme threw herself with vigour into political life, being especially active at question time. She was much respected and universally disliked. It was highly possible that she would be given an under-secretaryship when her party returned to power. Now she looked with grim satisfaction after the departing car. "Men always think they can impose upon women," she said. Sarah thought that it would be a brave man who thought he could impose upon Lady Westholme. She introduced Dr. Gerard, who had just come out of the hotel. A vague little middle-aged lady with wisps of grey hair, who was hovering nearby, turned out to be Miss Amabel Pierce, the 4th member of the party. All were swept into the lounge under Lady Westholme's wing to wait. In a quarter of an hour, a large and extremely comfortable car arrived, and in due course, after advice from Lady Westholme as to how the luggage should be bestowed, the party set off. Their first halt was the Dead Sea. They had lunch at Jericho. Afterwards, when Lady Westholme, armed with a Baedeker, had gone off with Miss Pierce, the doctor and the fat dragoman on a tour of old Jericho, Sarah remained in the garden of the hotel. She felt suddenly listless and uninterested, disinclined for sightseeing, bored by her companions. She wished at this moment that she had never committed herself to this Petra tour. Lady Westholme's booming voice, Miss Pierce's endless twittering, and the anti-Zionist lamentations of the dragoman were already fraying her nerves to a frazzle. She wondered where the Boyntons were now. Perhaps they'd gone on to Syria. Raymond. She wondered what Raymond was doing. Strange how clearly she could see his face. Oh, hell, why go on thinking of people she would probably never see again? That scene the other day with the old woman. What could have possessed her to march up to the old lady and spurt out a lot of nonsense? Other people must have heard. She fancied Lady Westholme had been close by. Goodness, what a fool she'd made of herself. But there was something about Mrs. Boynton that made you lose your sense of proportion. Dr. Gerard entered and plumped down in a chair, wiping his hot forehead. "Phew, that woman should be poisoned," he declared. Sarah started. "Mrs. Boynton." "Mrs. Boynton? No, I meant that Lady Westholme. It is incredible to me that she has had a husband for many years, and that he has not already done so." "I believe he is very proud of his wife's activities," said Sarah. Dr. Gerard raised his eyebrow. "Because they take a good deal away from home? Oh, that is understandable." Then he went on, "What did you say just now? Mrs. Boynton?" "Undoubtedly it would be a very good idea to poison her too. The simplest solution of that family problem." They reached Amman in the late afternoon, and after a short visit to the Greco-Roman theatre, went to bed early. They were to make an early start the next morning, as it was a full day's motor run across the desert to Ma'an. They left soon after 8 o'clock. The party was inclined to be silent. By noon, the irritation of a stiflingly hot day and being boxed up so closely together had got a little on everyone's nerves. Lady Westholme and Dr. Gerard had a somewhat irritable argument over the League of Nations. Lady Westholme was an ardent supporter, the Frenchman choosing to be witty at the League's expense. The argument raged on, and Miss Pierce twittered to Sarah, "It is really most interesting travelling with Lady Westholme." Sarah said acidly, "Is it?" But Miss Pierce did not notice the acerbity. "I've so often seen her name in the papers," she continued happily. "I'm always so glad when a woman accomplishes something." "Why?" demanded Sarah ferociously. Miss Pierce's mouth fell open, and she stammered a little. "Oh, because, just because, well, it's so nice that women are able to do things." "I don't agree," said Sarah. "It's nice when any human being is able to accomplish something. I do hate this differentiation between the sexes. There are just different types of brains. Sex only matters where sex is directly concerned." Miss Pierce flushed a little at the word sex, and adroitly changed the subject. "One can't help wishing that there were a little shade," she murmured. "But I do think all this emptiness is so wonderful, don't you?" Sarah nodded. Yes, she thought. The emptiness was marvellous. She felt soothed and at peace. It was about an hour off sunset when they came to Ma'an. After a short halt, they went on. Looking over the flat desert country, Sarah was at a loss as to where the rocky stronghold of Petra could be. There were no mountains, no hills anywhere. Were they then still many miles from their journey's end? At last they reached the village of Ain Musa, where the cars were to be left. Here horses were waiting for them. The inadequacy of her striped cotton frock disturbed Miss Pierce greatly. Lady Westholme was sensibly attired in riding breeches, not perhaps a particularly becoming style to her type of figure, but certainly practical. The horses were led out of the village along a slippery path with loose stones. The sun was close on setting. The way wound down into the ground. The shapes of rocks rose up around them. They went deeper, into the bowels of the earth through a labyrinth of red cliffs. They towered now on either side. Sarah felt stifled, menaced by the ever-narrowing gorge. She thought confusedly, down into the valley of death. It grew dark. Lanterns were lit. The horses wound along through the narrow ways. Then suddenly they came out into a wide space. The cliffs receded. Ahead of them was a cluster of lights. "That is camp," said the guide. They could see a group of tents, a higher row up against the face of a cliff. Caves, too, hollowed out in the rock. Sarah stared up at one of the caves. It held a sitting figure. What was it? An idol? A gigantic, squatting image? No, it was the flickering lights that made it loom so large. Then suddenly, her heart gave a leap of recognition. Gone was the feeling of peace, of escape, that the desert had given her. Here, like an arch-priestess of some forgotten cult, like a monstrous, swollen female Buddha, sat Mrs. Boynton. Mrs. Boynton was here, at Petra. Sarah answered mechanically questions that were addressed to her. Would she have dinner straight away? It was ready. Would she like to wash first? Would she prefer to sleep in a tent or a cave? Her answer to that came quickly. A tent. She flinched at the thought of a cave, with the vision of that monstrous squatting figure fresh in her mind. Finally, she forwarded one of the native servants. He wore khaki breeches, much patched, and untidy puttees, and a ragged coat. On his head the native headdress, the shiphia, its long folds protecting the neck, and secured in place with a black silk twist, fitting tightly to the crown of his head. Sarah admired the easy swing with which he walked, the careless, proud carriage of his head. Only the European part of his costume seemed tawdry and wrong. She thought, civilization is all wrong. But for civilization, there wouldn't be a Mrs. Boynton. In savage tribes, they'd probably have killed and eaten her years ago. She realized half-humorously that she was overtired and on edge. A wash in hot water and a dusting of powder over her face, and she felt herself again, cool, poised, and ashamed of her recent panic. She pushed aside the tent flap and came out into the night, prepared to descend to the big marquee below. "You! Here!" She turned to look straight into Raymond Boynton's eyes. He said again, "You!" His low, vibrant tone made her heart turn over in her breast. She said quite simply, "Yes." He came nearer. Then suddenly he took her hand. "It is you," he said. "You're real. I thought at first you were a ghost because I'd been thinking about you so much." He paused and then said, "I love you, you know. I have from the moment I saw you in the train. I know that now. And I want you to know it so that you'll know it isn't me, the real me, who behaves so caddishly. When she tells me to do things, I do them. My nerves make me. You will understand, won't you? Despise me if you have to." Sarah interrupted him. "I won't despise you." "All the same, I'm pretty despicable. I ought to be able to behave like a man." "You'll have courage now, I'm sure of it." He drew himself up. "Courage? Huh. Yes, that's all that's needed. Courage." Suddenly he bent his head, touched her hand with his lips. A minute later, he had left her. Sarah went down to the big marquee where she found her 3 fellow travellers sitting at a table eating. The guide was explaining that there was another party here. "They came 2 days ago. Go day after tomorrow. Americans. The mother very fat. Very difficult get here. Carried in chair by bearers. Ha, they say very hard work." "Ha," said Lady Westham. "I think these people were at the Solomon in Jerusalem. I recognized the old mother as we arrived here. I think I saw you talking to her at the hotel, Miss King." Sarah blushed guiltily, hoping Lady Westholme had not overheard much of that conversation. Really, what possessed me? she thought to herself in an agony. In the meantime, Lady Westham had made a pronouncement. "Not interesting people at all, very provincial," she said. Miss Pierce made eager sycophantish noises, and Lady Westham embarked on a history of various interesting and prominent Americans whom she had met recently. The weather being so unusually hot for the time of year, an early start was arranged for the morrow. The four assembled for breakfast at 6 o'clock. There were no signs of any of the Boynton family. After Lady Westham had commented unfavourably on the absence of fruit, they consumed tea, tinned milk, and fried eggs in a generous allowance of fat, flanked by extremely salt bacon. As they started forth, there was a sudden hail from the camp, and they halted to allow another person to join the party. It was Mr. Jefferson Cope who hurried after them, his pleasant face flushed with the exertion of running. "Why, if you don't mind, I'd like to join your party this morning. Good morning, Miss King. Quite a surprise meeting you and Dr. Gerard here." The party began to climb. 2 Bedouin guides accompanied them. Difficulties soon began. Sarah had a good head for heights, and so had Dr. Gerard, but both Mr. Cope and Lady Westham were far from happy, and the unfortunate Miss Pierce had to be almost carried over the precipitous places, her eyes shut, her face green. Once she declared her intention of going back, but on turning to face the descent, her skin assumed an even greener tinge, and she reluctantly decided that to go on was the only thing to be done. They arrived at last at the summit. Sarah drew a deep breath. All around and below stretched the blood-red rocks, a strange and unbelievable country unparalleled anywhere. Here, in the exquisite, pure morning air, they stood like gods, surveying a baser world, a world of flaring violence. Here the dragoman Mahmud told them was the place of sacrifice, the high place. He showed them the trough cut in the flat rock at their feet. Sarah moved away from the rest and gazed down on the world at her feet. Presently she was aware of someone standing by her side. Dr. Gerard said, "You are pondering something very deeply." "Yes, I am." She turned a perplexed face to him. "It's a wonderful idea to have a place of sacrifice up here. I think sometimes, don't you, the sacrifice is necessary. I mean, one can have too much regard for life. Death isn't really so important as we make out." "If you feel that, Miss King, you should not have adopted our profession. To us, death is and must always be the enemy." Sarah shivered. "Yes, I suppose you're right. And yet, so often, death might solve a problem. It might mean even fuller life." "It is expedient for us that one man should die for the people," quoted Gerard gravely. "Oh, I didn't mean—" Sarah broke off. Jefferson Cope was approaching them. "Now, this is really a most remarkable spot," he declared. "Most remarkable. And I'm so pleased not to have missed it. I don't mind confessing that though Mrs. Boynton is certainly a most remarkable woman, it does certainly complicate matters traveling with her. Her health is poor, and I suppose it naturally makes her a little inconsiderate of other people's feelings, but it does not seem to occur to her that her family might like occasionally to go on excursions without her." Mr. Cope broke off. His nice, kindly face looked a little disturbed and uncomfortable. "You know," he said, "I heard a piece of information about Mrs. Boynton that disturbed me greatly." Dr. Gerard said, "Indeed? What was it?" "My informant was a lady I came across in the hotel at Tiberias. It concerned a servant girl who had been in Mrs. Boynton's employ. The girl, I gather, was—" Mr. Cope glanced at Sarah and lowered his voice. "She was going to have a child. The old lady discovered this, but was apparently quite kind to the girl. Then, a few weeks before the child was born, she turned her out of the house." Dr. Gerard's eyebrows went up. "Ah," he said reflectively. "I don't know whether you agree," Mr. Cope said, "but that seems to me a very cruel and heartless thing to do. I cannot understand—" Dr. Gerard interrupted him. "You should try to. That incident, I have no doubt, gave Mrs. Boynton a good deal of quiet enjoyment. Mr. Kirk was shocked. "No, sir," he said, "that I cannot believe." Dr. Gerard said, "My dear sir, I have made a life study of the strange things that go on in the human mind. Below the decencies and conventions of everyday life, there lies a vast reservoir of strange things. There is such a thing, for instance, as delight in cruelty for its own sake. But when you have found that, there is something deeper still, the desire to be appreciated. If that is thwarted, if through an unpleasing personality a human being is unable to get the response it needs, it turns to other methods. It must be felt. It must count. And so, to innumerable strange perversions, the habit of cruelty, like any other habit, can be cultivated, can take hold of one." Mr. Cope coughed. "I think, Dr. Gerard, that you are slightly exaggerating." He edged away. Dr. Gerard smiled a little, then looked at Sarah. She was frowning, her face set in a youthful sternness. She looked, Gerard thought, like a young judge delivering sentence. He turned as Miss Pearce tripped unsteadily towards him. "Oh, we are going down now," she flattered. "Oh dear, I'm sure I shall never manage it, but the guide says the way down is quite a different route, and much easier. I do hope so." The descent was down the course of a waterfall. Although there were loose stones, which were a possible source of danger to ankles, it presented no dizzy vistas. The party arrived back at the camp, weary but in good spirits, and with an excellent appetite for a late lunch. It was past 2:00. The Boynton family was sitting round the big table in the marquee. They were just finishing their meal. Lady Westholme addressed a gracious sentence to them in her most condescending manner. "Really a most interesting morning," she said. "Petra is a wonderful spot." Then, having done her duty, Lady Westholme concentrated on her food. As they ate, the four discussed plans for the afternoon. "I think I shall rest most of the afternoon," said Miss Pearce. "It is important, I think, not to do too much." "I shall go for a walk and explore," said Sarah. "What about you, Dr. Gerard?" "I will go with you." "I think that I shall follow your example, Miss Pearce," said Lady Westholme. "Perhaps half an hour with a book, then I shall lie down and take an hour's rest at least. After that, perhaps, a short stroll." Slowly, helped by Lennox, old Mrs. Boynton struggled to her feet. She stood for a moment and then spoke. "You'd better all go for a walk this afternoon," she said with unexpected amiability. It was perhaps slightly ludicrous to see the startled faces of her family. "But, Mother, what about you?" "I don't need any of you. I like sitting alone with my book. Jenny had better not go. She'll lie down and have a sleep." "Mother, I'm not tired. I want to go with the others." "You are tired. You've got a headache. Go to your tent." Mrs. Boynton stumped out of the marquee. The others followed. "Dear me," said Miss Pearce, "what very peculiar people. Such a very odd colour, the mother. Quite purple. Hot, I should imagine. The heat must be very trying to her." Sarah thought, "She's letting them go free this afternoon. She knows Raymond wants to be with me. Is it a trap?" After lunch, as she changed into a fresh linen dress in her tent, the thought still worried her. Mrs. Boynton's sudden amiability was, to Sarah's suspicious mind, definitely sinister. It was about 3:15 when Sarah strolled down to the marquee. Lady Westholme was sitting in her tent, with the report of a royal commission on her lap. Dr. Gerard was talking to Miss Pearce, who was standing by her tent on the other side of the marquee, holding a book. "I don't think it's wise to lie down too soon after lunch," explained Miss Pearce. "One's digestion, you know." "Oh dear," she said, "do you think that old lady is wise to sit up there in the sun?" They all looked up at the ridge in front of them. Mrs. Boynton was sitting as she had sat last night, a motionless Buddha in the door of her cave. All the camp personnel were asleep. A short distance away, following the line of the valley, A little group of people walked together. "For once," said Dr. Gerard, "the good mamma permits them to enjoy themselves without her. A new devilment on her part, perhaps?" "Do you know," said Sarah, "that's just what I thought." "What suspicious minds we have. Come, let us join the truants." Leaving Miss Pearce, they set off. Once round the bend of the valley, they caught up the others who were walking slowly. The Boyntons looked happy and carefree. Lennox and Nadine, Carol and Raymond, Mr. Cope with a broad smile on his face, and the last arrivals, Gerard and Sarah, were soon all laughing and talking together. A sudden, wild hilarity was born. In everyone's mind was the feeling that this was a snatched pleasure to enjoy to the full. Sarah walked with Carol and Lennox. Dr. Gerard chatted to Raymond, close behind them. Nadine and Jefferson Cope walked a little apart. It was the Frenchman who broke up the party. Suddenly he stopped. "Ah, 1,000 excuses, I fear I must go back." Sarah looked at him. "Anything the matter?" He nodded. "Yes, fever. It's been coming on ever since lunch." Sarah scrutinized him. "Malaria?" "Yes. I'll go back and take quinine. Hope this won't be a bad attack. It is a legacy from a visit to the Congo." "Shall I come with you?" asked Sarah. No. I have my case of drugs with me. Confounded nuisance. Go on, all of you." He walked quickly back in the direction of the camp. For a time, the 6 of them, Carol, Sarah, Lennox, Mr. Cope, Nadine, and Raymond, kept together. Then, somehow or other, Sarah and Raymond had drifted apart. They walked on, climbing over rocks and ledges, and rested at last in a shady spot. There was a silence. Then Raymond said, "What's your name?" "Oh, it's King, I know, but your other name?" "Sarah." "Sarah. May I call you that?" "Of course." "Sarah, will you tell me something about yourself?" Leaning back against the rocks, she talked, telling him of her life at home in Yorkshire, of her dogs and the aunt who had brought her up. Then in his turn, Raymond told her a little disjointedly of his own life. After that, there was a long silence. Their hands strayed together. They sat like children, hand in hand, strangely content. Then, as the sun grew lower, Raymond stirred. "I'm going back now," he said. "No, not with you. There's something I have to say, and do. But I've got to do it alone." "Do what?" The young, boyish face grew suddenly stern. Raymond Boynton said, "I've got to prove my courage. It's now or never." Then abruptly, he turned and strode away. The sun was setting when Sarah came once more in sight of the camp. As she came nearer, she could make out Mrs. Boynton still sitting in the mouth of the cave. Sarah shivered a little at the sight of that grim, motionless figure. She hurried past on the path below and came into the lighted marquee. Lady Westham was sitting knitting a navy blue jumper, a skein of wool hung round her neck. Miss Pearce was embroidering a table mat with anemic blue forget-me-nots and being instructed on the proper reform of the divorce laws. The servants came in and out preparing for the evening meal. The Boyntons were at the far end of the marquee in deck chairs reading. Sarah went off to her tent to wash for supper. On the way back, she paused by Dr. Gerard's tent, calling in a low voice, "Dr. Gerard?" There was no answer. She lifted the flap and looked in. The doctor was lying motionless on his bed. Sarah withdrew noiselessly, hoping he was asleep. A servant came to her and pointed to the marquee. Evidently supper was ready. Everyone else was assembled there round the table, with the exception of Dr. Gerard and Mrs. Boynton. A servant was dispatched to tell the old lady dinner was ready. Then there was a sudden commotion outside. 2 frightened servants rushed in and spoke excitedly to the dragoman in Arabic. Mahmoud looked around in a flustered manner and went outside. On an impulse, Sarah joined him. "What's the matter?" she asked. "The old lady," Mahmoud replied. "Abdul says she is ill, cannot move." "I'll come and see." Sarah quickened her step. Following Mahmoud, she climbed the rock and walked along until she came to the squat figure in the chair, touched the puffy hand, felt for the pulse. bent over her. When she straightened up, she was pale. She retraced her steps back to the marquee. In the doorway, she paused a minute, looking at the group at the far end of the table. "I'm so sorry," she said. She forced herself to address the head of the family, Lennox. "Your mother is dead, Mr. Boynton." And curiously, as though from a great distance, she watched the faces of 5 people to whom that announcement meant freedom. Colonel Carberry smiled across the table at his guest and raised his glass. "Well, here's to crime." Hercule Poirot's eyes twinkled in acknowledgment. He had come to Aman with a letter of introduction to Colonel Carberry from Colonel Race. Carberry was an untidy, stocky man of medium height, with a semi-bald head and vague, mild blue eyes. He did not look in the least like a soldier. He did not even look particularly alert. Yet in Transjordania he was a power. "Tell me," Colonel Carberry said, "do you ever find your job has a way of following you round?" "Pardon?" "Well, to put it plainly, do you come to places expecting a holiday from crime and find instead bodies cropping up?" "It has happened, yes, more than once." Said Colonel Carberry, and looked particularly abstracted. Then he roused himself with a jerk. "Got a body now I'm not very happy about," he said. "Indeed?" "Yes, here in Amman, old American woman. Went to Petra with her family, suffered from heart trouble, trying journey, a bit harder for her than she imagined, extra strain on heart, she popped off. Only—" "Yes?" said Poirot. "Only—" Colonel Carberry scratched his bald head. "I've got the idea that her family did her in." "Uh-huh. And what makes you think that?" Colonel Carberry did not reply directly. "Unpleasant woman, it seems," he said. "No loss. General feeling all round that her popping off was a good thing. Anyway, very difficult to prove anything, so long as the family stick together and, if necessary, lie like hell." Poirot nodded. "There was no doctor down there?" he asked. "Yes, 2. One of them was down with malaria, though. The other's a girl, just out of the medical student stage. Still, she knows her job, I suppose. Now, there wasn't anything odd about the death. Old woman had got a dicky heart. She'd been taking heart medicine for some time. Nothing really surprising about her conking out suddenly like she did." "Then what, my friend, is worrying you?" asked Poirot gently. Colonel Carberry turned a harassed blue eye on him. "Heard of a Frenchman called Gerard? Theodore Gerard?" "Certainly. A very distinguished man in his own line." "Loony bins," confirmed Colonel Carberry. "Passion for a charwoman at the age of 4 makes you insist you're the Archbishop of Canterbury when you're 38. Can't see why, and never have." Poirot smiled. "And are Dr. Gerard's views on the happening at Petra based on that line of argument?" Colonel Carberry shook his head vigorously. No. Shouldn't have worried about them if they had been. No, Dr. Gerard's story is quite straightforward, just plain facts. I think, if you're interested, you are interested. Yes? Good man. Then I think I'll just send over and get Gerard along here, and you can hear his story for yourself." When the Colonel had dispatched an orderly on this quest, Poirot said, "Of what does this family consist?" "Name's Boynton." "Boynton," said Poirot. His eyebrows rose. "That is curious, very curious." Carberry cocked an inquiring eye at him, but as Poirot said nothing more, he himself went on, "Seems pretty obvious mother was a pest. Had to be waited on hand and foot and kept the whole lot of them dancing attendants. And she held the purse strings. None of them had a penny of their own." "Uh-huh. All very interesting. Is it known how she left her money?" "It gets divided equally between the lot of them," said Carberry. Poirot nodded. Then he asked, "You are of the opinion that they are all in it?" "Don't know whether it was a concerted effort, or whether it was one bright member's idea. Maybe the whole thing's a mare's nest. Or what it comes to is this. I'd like to have your professional opinion. Ah, here comes Gerard. Dr. Gerard related the events preceding the journey to Petra, then proceeded to the actual events of his party's first day there, describing how he had returned to the camp. "I was in for a bad bout of malaria," he explained. "I proposed to treat myself by an intravenous injection of quinine. That is the usual method." Poirot nodded in comprehension. Gerard continued, "The fever was on me badly. I fairly staggered into my tent. I could not at first find my case of drugs. Someone had moved it from where I had originally placed it. Then, when I found it, I could not find my hypodermic syringe. I hunted for it for some time, then gave it up and took a large dose of quinine by mouth and flung myself on my bed." "Mrs. Boynton's death was not discovered until after sunset," Gerard went on. "Miss King, who is a qualified doctor, examined the body. She did not disturb me, knowing that I had fever. There was indeed nothing that could be done. Mrs. Boynton was dead, and had been dead for some little time." Poirot murmured, "How long, exactly?" Gerard said slowly, "I do not think that Miss King gave much attention to that point. I presume she did not think it of any importance." "One can say at least when Madame Boynton was last definitely known to be alive?" said Poirot. Colonel Carberry cleared his throat and referred to an official-looking document. "Raymond Boynton, the younger son, seems to have been the last person to see her alive. On his return from a walk, he went and spoke to her at about 10 minutes to 6. The discovery of the body was made at 6:30, when a servant went to tell her dinner was ready." "Between the time that Mr. Raymond Boynton spoke to her and 6:30, did no one go near her?" asked Poirot. "I understand not," Carberry replied. "From close on 6 onwards, servants were moving about the camp, people were going to and from their tents. No one can be found who saw anyone approaching the old lady." "Then Raymond Boynton was definitely the last person to see his mother alive," said Poirot. "This is where we begin to get into deep waters," Carberry said. "Go on, Gerard. This is your pigeon." Gerard coughed. "As I mentioned just now, when Sarah King examined Mrs. Boynton, she saw no reason for determining the exact time of death. But when, on the following day, for reasons of my own, I endeavored to narrow things down and happened to mention that Mrs. Boynton was last seen alive by her son Raymond a little before 6, Miss King said, point-blank, that that was impossible, that at that time Mrs. Boynton must already have been dead." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Odd. And what does Monsieur Raymond Boynton say to that?" Colonel Carberry said abruptly, "He swears that his mother was alive." Poirot frowned. "Extremely curious." "Go on, Gerard," said Colonel Carberry. "Give him the rest of it." "On getting up in the morning," said Dr. Gerard, "I found my hypodermic syringe. It was behind a case on my dressing table." He leaned forward. "You may say that I had overlooked it the day before. I was in a miserable state of fever. I can only say that I am quite positive the syringe was not there then." "There's something more," said Carberry. "Yes," Gerard nodded. "2 facts. There was a mark on the dead woman's wrist, a mark such as would be caused by the insertion of a hypodermic syringe. Her daughter, I may say, explains it as having been caused by the prick of a pin." Poirot stared. "Which daughter?" "Her daughter Carol." "Yes. Continue, I pray you." "And, happening to examine my case of drugs, I noticed that my stock of digitoxin was very much diminished." "Digitoxin," said Poirot, "is a heart poison, is it not?" "Yes. It is obtained from Digitalis purpurea, the common foxglove. Digitoxin is from 6 to 10 times stronger than digitalin." "And a large dose of digitoxin?" Dr. Gerard said gravely, "A large dose of digitoxin thrown suddenly on the circulation by intravenous injection would cause sudden death by quick palsy of the heart." "And Mrs. Boynton already suffered with heart trouble?" Poirot observed. "Yes, as a matter of fact, she was actually taking a medicine containing digitalin." "That," said Poirot, "is extremely interesting." "Do you mean," asked Colonel Carberry, "that her death might have been attributed to an overdose of her own medicine?" "That, yes," said Dr. Gerard. "Moreover, as regards post-mortem appearance, the active principles of digitalis may destroy life and leave no sign." Poirot nodded slow appreciation. "Yes, that is clever, very clever, almost impossible to prove satisfactorily to a jury. But let me tell you, gentlemen, if this is a murder, it is a very clever murder. The hypodermic replaced, the poison employed, a poison which the victim was already taking, the possibilities of a mistake or accident are overwhelming. Oh yes, there are brains here. There is thought, care, genius." For a moment he sat in silence. Then he looked up. "And yet, one thing puzzles me. The theft of the hypodermic syringe." "It was taken," said Dr. Gerard quickly. "Taken and returned?" "Yes." "Odd," said Poirot. "Very odd. Otherwise everything fits so well." Colonel Carberry looked at him curiously. "Well," he said, "what's your expert opinion? Was it murder, or wasn't it?" Poirot held up a hand. "One moment. We have not yet arrived at that point. There is still some evidence to consider." "What evidence? You've had it all." But this is evidence that I, Hercule Poirot, bring to you." He nodded and smiled a little at their astonished faces. "It was like this. In the Solomon Hotel, one night I go to the window to close it, but, as my hand is on the latch, I hear a voice speaking. I say to myself, it is a voice I will know again, and what does it say, this voice? It says these words: 'You do see, don't you, that she's got to be killed?' At the time I think it is an author, or perhaps a playwright who speaks, but now I am sure it was nothing of the kind." He paused, then said, "Monsieur, I will tell you this. To the best of my knowledge and belief, those words were spoken by a young man whom I saw later in the lounge of the hotel, a young man of the name of Raymond Boynton." "Raymond Boynton said that?" The exclamation broke from the Frenchman. "You think it unlikely, psychologically speaking?" Poirot inquired placidly. Gerard shook his head. "No, I should not say that. I was surprised, yes, just because Raymond Boynton was so eminently fitted to be a suspect." Colonel Carberry sighed. "These psychological fellas," the sigh seemed to say. "Question is," he murmured, "what are we going to do about it?" Gerard shrugged. "I do not see what you can do," he confessed. "The evidence is bound to be inconclusive. You may know that murder has been done, but it will be difficult to prove it." "I see," said Colonel Carberry. "We suspect murder's been done, and we just sit back and twiddle our fingers. Don't like it." Poirot said, "You desire to know, do you not, Colonel Carberry, who killed Mrs. Boynton? That is, if she was killed and did not die a natural death, exactly how and when she was killed, and in fact the whole truth of the matter?" "I should like to know that, yes." Carberry spoke unemotionally. "Then," echoed Poirot said slowly, "I see no reason why you should not know it." Colonel Carberry looked mildly interested. "Oh?" he said. "And how do you propose to set about it?" "By methodical sifting of the evidence, by a process of reasoning." "Suits me," said Colonel Carberry. "And by a study of the psychological possibilities." "Suits Gerard, I expect," said Carberry. Poirot said, "The first thing to decide is whether this is a composite murder, planned and carried out by the Boynton family as a whole, or whether it is the work of one of them only. If the latter, which is the most likely member of the family to have attempted it?" Dr. Gerard said, "There is your own evidence. One must, I think, consider first Raymond Boynton." "I agree," said Poirot. The words I overheard and the discrepancy between his evidence and that of the young woman doctor puts him definitely in the forefront of the suspects. He was the last person to see Mrs. Boynton alive. That is his story. Sarah King contradicts that. Tell me, Dr. Gerard, is there a little tendresse, shall we say, there? The Frenchman nodded. Emphatically so. Aha! Is she, this young lady, a brunette with hair that goes back from her forehead and big hazel eyes and a manner very decided? Dr. Gerard looked rather surprised. Yes, that describes her very well. I think I have seen her in the Solomon Hotel. She spoke to this Raymond Boynton, and afterwards he remained in a dream, blocking the exit from the lift. Poirot remained in thought for some moments. Then he said, So, to begin with, we will accept the medical evidence of Miss King with certain reservations. She is an interested party. Now tell me, Dr. Gerard, do you think Raymond Boynton is of the temperament that could commit murder easily? Gerard said slowly, You mean deliberate, planned murder? Yes, I think it is possible, but only under conditions of intense emotional strain. Those conditions were present? Definitely. This journey abroad, the strong attraction he felt to Sarah King, all would give an additional motive and an additional stimulus, suggested Poirot. That is so, agreed Gerard. Poirot continued, Can you tell us something, Doctor, of the mental condition of the other members of the family? Gerard replied promptly, Carol Boynton was, I should say, in very much the same state as Raymond, a state of rebellion accompanied by a severe nervous excitement. Lennox Boynton had passed the state of revolt. He was sunk in apathy. And his wife? His wife, though tired and unhappy, showed no signs of mental conflict. She was, I believe, hesitating on the brink of a decision whether or not to leave her husband. Gerard repeated the conversation he had held with Jefferson Cope. And what of the younger girl? Asked Poirot. Her name is Ginevra, is it not? The Frenchman's face was grave. I should say that mentally she is in an extremely dangerous condition. She has already begun to display symptoms of schizophrenia, but I doubt if she would have had the knowledge to do it the way it was done. But she is a possibility, Poirot insisted. Yes, admitted Gerard. And afterwards, when the deed was done, do you think the rest of the family knew who had done it? They know it, said Colonel Carberry unexpectedly. If ever I came across a bunch of people who had something to hide, these are they. We will make them tell us what it is, said Poirot. Third degree, said Colonel Carberry. No, Poirot shook his head. Just ordinary conversation. You'll talk to them, Carberry said. That means you're willing to take this on? Poirot bowed his head. Let us be very clear about this, he said. What you demand and what I undertake to supply is the truth. But mark this. Even when we have got the truth, there may be no proof. You comprehend? Quite, said Carberry. One thing more. I can't give you much time, can't detain these people here indefinitely. Poirot said quietly, You can detain them for 24 hours. You shall have the truth by tomorrow night. Sarah King looked long and searchingly at Hercule Poirot. She noted the egg-shaped head, the gigantic moustaches, the dandified appearance, and the suspicious blackness of his hair. A look of doubt crept into her eyes, and she thought, The man's a mountebank. She said aloud, I don't think I quite understand the object of this interview. Eh bien, one wants, does one not, to get at the truth of this affair? Are you talking about Mrs. Boynton's death? Yes. Isn't it rather a fuss about nothing? You have no doubt yourself as to Mrs. Boynton's death? Sarah shrugged. Really, Monsieur Poirot, if you had been to Petra, you would realize how strenuous the journey was for an old woman whose cardiac condition was unsatisfactory. It seems a perfectly straightforward business to you? Certainly. Poirot was silent for a moment. Then he said, "There is a fact, Miss King, that you do not yet know." "What fact?" demanded Sarah. "A supply of a drug, digitoxin, is missing from Dr. Gerard's traveling medicine case." "Oh." Quickly Sarah took in this new aspect of the case. "Is Dr. Gerard sure of that?" Poirot shrugged. "A doctor, as you should know, mademoiselle, is usually fairly careful in making his statements." "Oh, of course, that goes without saying." "And there is other evidence, mademoiselle." "What evidence?" Her voice was sharp. "The mark of a hypodermic puncture upon the dead woman's wrist. And something more still, some words that I overheard, spoken in Jerusalem, on a clear still night when I went to close my bedroom window." "Shall I tell you what those words were, Miss King?" "They were these. I heard Mr. Raymond Boynton say, 'You do see, don't you, that she's got to be killed?'" He saw the color drain slowly from Sarah's face. "You see now why I think there should be an investigation." Sarah said quietly, "I think you're quite right." "Ah, and you will help me?" "Certainly." Her tone was matter-of-fact, unemotional. Her eyes met his coolly. Poirot bowed. "Thank you, mademoiselle. Now I will ask you to tell me in your own words exactly what you can remember of that particular day." Sarah considered for a moment. "Let me see. I went on an expedition in the morning. None of the Boyntons were with us. I saw them at lunch. They were finishing as we came in. Mrs. Boynton seemed in an unusually good temper." "She was not usually amiable, I understand?" "Very far from it," said Sarah with a slight grimace. Then she described how Mrs. Boynton had released her family from attendance on her. "That, too, was unusual?" "Yes, she usually kept them around her." "Do you think, perhaps, that she suddenly felt remorseful, that she had what is called un bon moment?" "No, I don't," said Sarah bluntly. "I thought she was up to some new devilry or other." "What happened next, mademoiselle?" "The Boyntons started off." "All of them?" "No, the youngest, Ginevra, was left behind. She was told to go and rest." "Did she wish to do so?" "No, but that didn't matter. She did what she was told." "The others started off. Dr. Gerard and I followed them." "When was this?" "About 3:30. "Where was Mrs. Boynton then?" Poirot asked. Nadine Boynton had settled her in her chair outside her cave. "Proceed." "When we got round the bend," Sarah went on, "Dr. Gerard and I caught up the others, and we all walked together. Then after a while, Dr. Gerard turned back. I could see he had fever. I wanted to go back with him, but he wouldn't hear of it." "And the rest?" "We went on," Sarah replied. "Were you all together?" Poirot asked. "At first. Then we split up." Sarah hurried on as though foreseeing the next question. "Nadine Boynton and Mr. Cope went one way, and Carol, Lennox, Raymond and I went another." "And you continued like that?" "Well, no. Raymond Boynton and I separated from the others. We sat down on a slab of rock and admired the wildness of the scenery. Then he went off, and I stayed where I was for some time longer. I reached the camp at 6:00. It was just about sunset." "You passed Mrs. Boynton on the way?" "I noticed she was still in her chair upon the ridge." "That did not strike you as odd that she had not moved?" "No, because I had seen her sitting there the night before when we arrived." "I see. Continuez." "I went into the marquee. The others were all there, except Dr. Gerard. I went to my tent where I washed, and then came back. They brought in dinner, and one of the servants went to tell Mrs. Boynton. He came running back to say she was ill. I hurried out. She was sitting in her chair just as she had been, but as soon as I touched her, I realized she was dead." "You had no doubt at all as to her death being natural?" "None whatever." I'd heard that she suffered from heart trouble, though no specified disease had been mentioned. Did you form an opinion as to how long she had been dead? I didn't really think very much about it. She'd clearly been dead some time. What do you call some time? Asked Poirot. Well, over an hour. It might have been much longer. The refraction of the rock would keep her body from cooling quickly. Over an hour? Are you aware, Mademoiselle King, that Raymond Boynton spoke to her only a little over half an hour earlier, and that she was then alive and well? Now her eyes no longer met his. But she shook her head. He must have made a mistake. It must have been earlier than that. No, mademoiselle, it was not. She looked at him point blank. He noticed again the firm set of her mouth. Well, said Sarah, I haven't got much experience of dead bodies, but I know enough to be quite sure of one thing. Mrs. Boynton had been dead at least an hour when I examined her body. Thank you, mademoiselle, said Poirot. I will now converse with the other witnesses. Lady Westholme entered the room with the assurance of a transatlantic liner coming into dock. Miss Amabel Pierce, an indeterminate craft, followed in the liner's wake, and sat down in an inferior make of chair slightly in the background. Rest assured, Monsieur Poirot, boomed Lady Westholme, I shall be delighted to assist you by any means in my power. I have always considered that in matters of this kind one has a public duty to perform. When Lady Westholme's public duty had held the stage for some minutes, Poirot was adroit enough to get in a question. If you will tell me exactly what occurred. Certainly, said Lady Westholme. I was in favour of a siesta, Miss Pierce agreed with me. Oh, yes, sighed Miss Pierce. I was terribly tired after the morning. Poirot said, So after lunch then, you two ladies went to your tents? Yes. Mrs. Boynton was then sitting at the mouth of her cave. Lady Westholme nodded. Her daughter-in-law assisted her there before she herself went off. You could both see her? Oh, yes, said Miss Pierce. She was opposite our tents, you know, only of course a little way to the side and higher up on the ledge. But of course it was some distance away. Nearly 200 yards, I understand, said Poirot. Bien, he continued. I have here a plan. The cave next to Mrs. Boynton's was occupied by Lennox Boynton and his wife. Raymond, Carroll, and Ginevra Boynton had tents just below the ledge, but more to the right, in fact, almost opposite the marquee, which was on the other side of the stream. On the right of Ginevra Boynton's was Dr. Gérard's tent, and next to his was Miss King's. On the other side of the stream was the marquee. Lady Westholme and Mr. Cope had tents on the left of the marquee. Miss Pierce's was on the right. Is that correct? Lady Westholme agreed that it was. Thank you. Pray continue, Lady Westholme. At about 3:45, I strolled along to Miss Pierce's tent to see if she were awake yet and felt like a stroll. She was sitting in the doorway of her tent reading. We agreed to start in about half an hour when the sun was less hot. I went back to my tent and read for about 25 minutes. Then I went along and joined Miss Pierce, and we started out. Everyone in the camp seemed asleep. There was no one about, and seeing Mrs. Boynton sitting up there alone, I suggested to Miss Pierce that we should ask her if she wanted anything before we left. Yes, you did. Most thoughtful of you, murmured Miss Pierce. And for her to be so rude about it. Poirot looked inquiring. Our path passed just under the ledge, explained Lady Westholme, and I called up to her, saying that we were going for a stroll, and could we do anything for her before we went? Do you know, Monsieur Poirot, absolutely the only answer she gave was a grunt. A grunt. She just looked at us as though we were dirt. Disgraceful, said Miss Pierce, flushing. I must confess, said Lady Westholme, reddening a little herself, that I made a somewhat uncharitable remark. I think you were quite justified, said Miss Pierce. What was this remark? Asked Poirot. I said to Miss Pierce that perhaps she drank. Really, her manner was most peculiar. Had her manner been peculiar earlier that day? At lunchtime, for instance? Poirot inquired. No, said Lady Westham, considering. No, I should say that her manner then had been fairly normal, for an American of that type, that is to say, she added condescendingly. She was very abusive to that servant, said Miss Pearce, when we were both still in our tents, not very long before we started out. Oh, yes, I remember. She did seem extraordinarily annoyed with him, said Lady Westham. What servant was this? Asked Poirot. One of the Bedouin servants attached to the camp, said Lady Westham. He went up to her. I think she must have sent him to fetch her something, and I suppose he brought the wrong thing. I don't really know what it was, but she was very angry about it. The poor man slunk away as fast as he could, and she shook her stick at him and called out. What did she call out? Poirot asked. We were too far away to hear. At least I didn't hear anything distinctly. Did you, Miss Pearce? No, said Miss Pearce regretfully. I didn't. I think she'd sent him to fetch something from her youngest daughter's tent. Or perhaps she was angry with him for going into her daughter's tent. I couldn't say exactly. What did he look like? Miss Pearce, to whom the question was addressed, shook her head vaguely. Oh, really, I couldn't say. He was too far away. All these Arabs look alike to me. He was a man of more than average height, Lady Westham stated, and wore the usual native headdress. He had on a pair of very torn and patched breeches, and his puttees were wound most untidily, all anyhow. But these men need discipline. You could point the man out among the camp servants? I doubt it. We didn't see his face. It was too far away. To continue with your story, said Poirot. We strolled along slowly, said Lady Westham, and then we sat down on a rock. Were you out of sight of the camp? No, we were sitting facing towards it. Did you see any other members of the party? Poirot inquired. Yes, the elder Mr. Boynton and his wife passed us on their way back to the camp. Were they together? Poirot asked. No, Mr. Boynton came first, said Lady Westham. He looked a little as though he had had a touch of the sun. He was walking as though he was slightly dizzy. What did Mr. Lennox Boynton do on his return to the camp? Asked Poirot. For once, Miss Pearce managed to get in first, before Lady Westham could speak. He went right up to his mother, but he didn't stay long with her, just a minute or two. I should put it at just over a minute myself, said Lady Westham. Then he went on into his cave, and after that he went down to the marquee. And his wife? Well, she came along about a quarter of an hour later. She stopped a minute and spoke to us. You watched her return to the camp? Poirot asked. Lady Westham nodded. Yes, she went up to the ledge and spoke to her mother-in-law. Then she went into her own cave and brought out a chair and sat by her talking for some time, about 10 minutes, I should say. Then she took the chair back to her cave and went down to the marquee where her husband was. What happened next? Poirot asked. That very peculiar American came along, said Lady Westham. Cope, I think his name is. He told us that there was a very good example of the debased architecture of the period just round the bend of the valley. He said we ought not to miss it. Accordingly, we walked there. It was all most interesting, declared Miss Pearce. Lady Westham continued, We strolled back to the camp, it being then about 20 minutes to 6. It was growing quite chilly. Mrs. Boynton was still sitting where you had left her? Yes, Lady Westham confirmed. Did you speak to her? No. As a matter of fact, I hardly noticed her. And then? I went to my tent, changed my shoes, then went to the marquee where I directed the dragoman to make some tea for Miss Pearce and myself. Was there anyone in the marquee? Oh, Mr. and Mrs. Lennox Boynton was sitting at one end reading, and Carol Boynton was there too. And Mr. Cope? He joined us at our tea, said Miss Pearce, though he said tea-drinking wasn't an American habit. If you will just conclude your recital of the day's happening, murmured Poirot. Certainly. Lady Westham thought a moment. As far as I can remember, Raymond Boynton and the red-haired Boynton girl came in shortly afterwards. Miss King arrived last. Dinner was then ready to be served. One of the servants was dispatched to announce the fact to old Mrs. Boynton. The man came running back in a state of some agitation and spoke to the dragoman in Arabic. There was some mention of Mrs. Boynton being taken ill. Miss King offered her services. She went out with the dragoman. She came back and brought the news to the members of Mrs. Boynton's family. She did it very abruptly, put in Miss Pierce. Just blurted it out. I think myself it ought to have been done more gradually. And how did Mrs. Boynton's family take the news? Poirot asked. Well, really, it is difficult to say. Lady Westham had lost a little of her self-assurance. They were very quiet about it. Stunned, said Miss Pierce. She offered the word more as a suggestion than as a fact. They all went out with Miss King, Lady Westham continued. And that is all I know. You have been most clear, most definite, Poirot said. I have an excellent memory, said Lady Westham with satisfaction. One last little demand, Lady Westham, said Poirot. Please continue to sit as you are sitting, without looking round. Now, would you be so kind as to describe to me just what Miss Pierce is wearing today? That is, if Miss Pierce does not object. Oh, no, not in the least, twittered Miss Pierce. Really, Monsieur Poirot, is there any object? Please be so kind as to do as I ask, madame. Lady Westham shrugged, and then said with rather bad grace, Miss Pierce has on a striped brown and white cotton dress, and is wearing with it a Sudanese belt of red, blue, and beige leather. She is wearing beige silk stockings and brown glacé strap shoes. There is a ladder in her left stocking. She paused, a pause of quiet confidence. Then, is there anything further? Poirot spread out his hands. You have my entire admiration, madame. Your observation is of the highest order. Details rarely escape me. Lady Westham rose, made a slight inclination of her head, and left the room. As Miss Pierce was following her, Poirot said, A little moment, please, mademoiselle. Yes? Miss Pierce turned, a slightly apprehensive look upon her face. Poirot leaned forward confidentially. You see this bunch of wildflowers on the table here? Yes, said Miss Pierce. And you noticed that when you first came into the room I sneezed once or twice? Yes. Did you notice if I had just been sniffing those flowers? Well, really, no, I couldn't say, said Miss Pierce. Poirot persisted. But you remember my sneezing? Oh, yes, I remember that. He shrugged. Ah, well, no matter. I wondered, you see, if these flowers might induce the hay fever. No matter. Poirot got rid of Miss Pierce and shut the door. But I did not sneeze, he murmured. So much for that. No, I did not sneeze. Lennox Boynton came into the room with a quick, resolute step. His apathy was gone. His bearing was alert, although he was plainly nervous. Good morning, Mr. Boynton. Poirot rose. I much appreciate you giving me this interview. Lennox Boynton said, Colonel Carberry advised it. Some formalities, he said. But why have all these formalities arisen? In cases of sudden and unexplained deaths, formalities must necessarily arise, said Poirot. What do you mean by unexplained? Lennox said sharply. Poirot shrugged. There is always a question to be considered. Is a death natural, or might it perhaps be suicide? Suicide. Lennox Boynton stared. Poirot said lightly, You, of course, would know best about such possibilities, but it is all very simple, really, a matter, as they say, of routine. He paused. Now, on the afternoon of your mother's death, I believe you left the camp at Petra and went for a walk. Yes, we all went. with the exception of my mother and my youngest sister. Your mother was then sitting in the mouth of her cave? Yes, she sat there every afternoon. Quite so. Poirot nodded. You stopped at when? Soon after 3, I should say. You returned when? I really couldn't say what time it was. 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock perhaps. Did you pass anyone on your way back? Poirot continued. 2 ladies sitting on a rock, for instance? I don't know. Lennox frowned. Yes, I think I did. You were perhaps too absorbed in your thoughts to notice, Poirot suggested. Yes, I was. Did you speak to your mother when you got back to the camp? Lennox hesitated. Yes, I did. She did not then complain of feeling ill? No, she seemed perfectly all right. May I ask exactly what passed between you? Lennox frowned again in concentration. She said I had come back soon. I said, yes, I had. I said it was hot. She asked me the time, said her wristwatch had stopped. I took it from her, wound it up, set it, and put it back on her wrist. And what time was it when you set it? Poirot asked. Oh, it was 25 minutes to 5. So you do know exactly the time you returned to the camp, said Poirot gently. Lennox flushed. Oh, yes, what a fool I am. I'm sorry, Monsieur Poirot. My wits are all astray, I'm afraid. All this worry. Poirot chimed in quickly. Oh, I understand perfectly. It is all most disquieting. And what happened next? I asked my mother if she wanted anything, a drink, tea, coffee. She said no. Then I went to the marquee. My wife came in not long after. And you did not see your mother again alive? Poirot asked. No. And she did not seem in any way agitated or upset when you talked to her? No, she was exactly as usual. She did not refer to any trouble, or annoyance with one of the servants. Then it Poirot looked with interest at the tall, dignified young woman who entered the room. He rose and bowed politely. Mrs. Lennox Boynton, Hercule Poirot at your service. Nadine Boynton sat down, her thoughtful eyes on Poirot's face. I hope you do not mind, madame, my intruding on your sorrow in this way. She did not reply at once. At last, she gave a sigh and said, I think it is best for me to be quite frank with you, Monsieur Poirot. I agree with you, madame. You apologized for intruding upon my sorrow. That sorrow, Monsieur Poirot, does not exist, and it is idle to pretend that it does. I had no love for my mother-in-law, and I cannot honestly say that I regret her death. Thank you, madame, for your plain speaking. Nadine went on. Still, although I cannot pretend sorrow, I can admit to another feeling. Remorse. Remorse? Poirot's eyebrows rose. Yes. You see, it was I who brought about her death. For that I blame myself bitterly. Poirot leaned back in his chair. Will you be so kind as to elucidate the statement, madame? Nadine bent her head. On the afternoon of my mother-in-law's death, I came to a decision. I had a friend, a very good friend. He has suggested more than once that I should throw in my lot with him. On that afternoon, I accepted his proposal. You decided to leave your husband? Yes. Continue, madame. Nadine said in a lower voice, having once made my decision, I wanted to establish it as soon as possible. I walked home to the camp by myself. My mother-in-law was sitting alone. There was no one about, and I decided to break the news to her there and then. I got a chair from my cave, sat down by her, and told her abruptly what I had decided. She was surprised, Poirot asked. Yes, I'm afraid it was a great shock to her. She was both surprised and angry, very angry. Presently I refused to discuss the matter any longer. I got up and walked away. My voice dropped. I never saw her again, alive. Poirot nodded slowly. I see. Then he said, "What exactly did you do when you left her?" "I took my chair back into my cave. Then I went down to the marquee. My husband was there." Poirot watched her closely as he said, "Did you tell him of your decision then, or had you already told him?" There was an infinitesimal pause before Nadine said, "I told him then." "How did he take it?" She answered quietly, "He was very upset." Poirot said, "You will pardon me, but the other man was, of course, Mr. Jefferson Cope?" "Yes." There was a long pause. Then, without any change of voice, Poirot asked, "Do you own a hypodermic syringe, madame?" "Yes." "No." His eyebrows rose. She explained, "I have an old hypodermic in a traveling medicine chest, but it is in our big luggage, which we left in Jerusalem." "I see." There was a pause. Then she said with a shiver of uneasiness, "Why did you ask me that, Monsieur Poirot?" He did not answer the question. Instead, he put one of his own. "Mrs. Boynton was, I believe, taking a mixture containing digitalis?" "Yes." He thought that she was definitely watchful now. "Digitalis is to some extent a cumulative drug. If Mrs. Boynton had taken a big overdose—" Nadine interrupted. "She did not," she said decisively. "She was always most careful. So was I if I measured the dose for her." "There might have been an overdose in this particular bottle," Poirot suggested. "A mistake of the chemist who made it up?" "I think that is very unlikely," she replied quietly. "Ah well, the analysis will soon tell us." "Unfortunately, the bottle was broken," Nadine said. Poirot eyed her with sudden interest. "Indeed? Who broke it?" She hesitated. "I'm not sure. One of the servants, I think. In carrying my mother-in-law's body into her cave, a table got knocked over." Poirot eyed her steadily for a minute or two. "That," he said, "is very interesting." Nadine Boynton shifted wearily in her chair. "You are suggesting, I think, that my mother-in-law did not die of shock, but of an overdose of digitalis?" she said. "That seems to me most improbable." Poirot leaned forward. "Even when I tell you that Dr. Gérard had missed an appreciable quantity of a preparation of digitoxin from his medicine chest?" Her face grew very pale. "Well, madame," said Poirot at last, "what have you to say to that?" "Monsieur Poirot, I did not kill my mother-in-law. She was alive and well when I left her." "And what happened, madame, after you left your mother-in-law, whilst you and your husband were in the marquee together?" She shrugged her shoulders. "How should I know?" "You do know." "Or you suspect?" She looked him straight in the eyes. "I know nothing, Monsieur Poirot." Turning, she left the room. After noting on his pad NB 440, Poirot opened the door and called to the orderly to fetch Miss Carol Boynton. He looked with some interest at the girl as she entered, at the chestnut hair, the poise of the head on the long neck, the nervous energy of the beautifully shaped hands. He said, "Sit down, mademoiselle." She sat down obediently. Poirot began with a mechanical expression of sympathy, then said, "And now, mademoiselle, will you recount to me how you spent the afternoon of the day in question?" Her answer came promptly, raising the suspicion that it had already been well rehearsed. "After luncheon, we all went for a stroll. I returned to the camp." Poirot interrupted. "A little minute. Were you all together until then?" "No, I was with my brother Raymond and Miss King for most of the time. Then I strolled off on my own." "Thank you. And you were saying you returned to the camp. Do you know the approximate time? I believe it was just about 10 minutes past 5. Poirot put down CB 510 on his pad. And what then? He asked. My mother was still sitting where she had been when we set out. I went up and spoke to her and then went on to my tent. And you remember exactly what passed between you? I just said it was very hot and that I was going to lie down. My mother said she would remain where she was. That was all. And what did you do next, mademoiselle? I went to my tent and lay down for about half an hour. Then I went down to the marquee. My brother and his wife were there reading. Did you speak to your mother again on your way to the marquee? Carol shook her head. No, I went straight down. And then? I remained in the marquee until Miss King told us she was dead. Poirot leaned forward. His tone was the same, light and conversational. And what did you feel, mademoiselle, when you found that your mother, your stepmother, was she not, was dead? Her eyes dropped. It was a great shock, she said. Was it? Was it such a great shock, mademoiselle, remembering a certain conversation you had with your brother Raymond one night in Jerusalem? His shock proved right. He saw it in the way the color drained out of her cheeks again. You know about that? She whispered. Yes, I know. But how? Part of your conversation was overheard. Oh! Carol Boynton buried her face in her hands. Her sobs shook the table. Hercule Poirot waited a minute. Then he said quietly, You were planning together to bring about your stepmother's death. Carol sobbed brokenly. We were mad that evening, mad, but we didn't really do it. Of course we didn't. When daylight came, the whole thing seemed absurd, melodramatic, and wicked, too. Mother died perfectly naturally of heart failure. Ray and I had nothing to do with it. There was silence. Poirot thoughtfully caressed his superb moustache. Then he said, You and your brother must have had a plan. In his mind, he ticked off the seconds before her answer came. 1, 2, 3. We had no plan, said Carol at last. We never got as far as that. Hercule Poirot got up. That is all, mademoiselle. Will you be so good as to send your brother to me? Poirot noted the likeness between brother and sister as Raymond Boynton came into the room. He did not seem nervous or afraid. He dropped into a chair, stared hard at Poirot, and said, Well? Poirot said gently, Your sister has spoken with you? Raymond nodded. Yes, when she told me to come here. Of course, I realize that your suspicions are quite justified. If our conversation was overheard that night, the fact that my stepmother died rather suddenly certainly would seem suspicious. I can only assure you that the conversation was the madness of the evening. At the time, we were under intolerable strain. This fantastic plan of killing my stepmother, well, it let off steam somehow. Poirot did not answer, and Raymond said quickly, Oh yes, I know that is easy enough to say. I cannot expect you to believe me on my bare word, but consider the facts. I spoke to my mother just a little before 6 o'clock. She was certainly alive and well then, and from then on, both Carol and I were in full sight of everyone. Poirot said quietly, Do you know, Mr. Boynton, that Miss King is of the opinion that when she examined the body at 6:30, death had occurred at least an hour and a half and probably 2 hours earlier. Raymond stared at him dumbfounded. But it's impossible. That is Miss King's testimony, said Poirot. Now you come and tell me that your mother was alive and well only 40 minutes before Miss King examined the body. But she was, Raymond said. Sarah must be mistaken. I can assure you, Monsieur Poirot, that my mother was alive at just before 6 and that I spoke to her. Poirot's face showed nothing. Raymond leant forward earnestly. Monsieur Poirot, you are a biased person. You live in an atmosphere of crime. Every sudden death must seem to you a possible crime. But there is nothing really about my mother's death to awaken suspicion except that unlucky, hysterical conversation between Carol and myself. Poirot shook his head. You are in error. There is something else. There is the poison taken from Dr. Gérard's medicine chest. Poison? Raymond stared at him. Poison? He pushed his chair back a little. He looked completely stupefied. Is that what you suspect? Poirot gave him a minute or two. Then he said quietly, almost indifferently, Your plan was different, huh? Oh, yes, Raymond answered mechanically. What was your plan? Our plan? It was... Raymond stopped abruptly. His eyes became alert, suddenly watchful. I don't think, he said, that I'll say any more. As you please, said Poirot. He watched the young man out of the room. He drew his pad towards him and in small, neat characters made a final entry, RB 555, ? Sarah King sat on a hilltop, absently plucking up wild flowers. Dr. Gérard sat on a rough wall of stone near her. She said suddenly and fiercely, Why did you start all this? If it hadn't been for you... Dr. Gérard said slowly, You think I should have kept silence, knowing what I knew. You didn't know, said Sarah. You had fever, a high temperature. You couldn't be clear-headed about the business. Gérard said cynically, You need not worry. The evidence is almost bound to be inconclusive. You will see, your friends the Boyntons will get away with it. Sarah said in a low voice, They haven't escaped, any of them. She's still there. Even from her grave she can reach out and hold them. She clenched her hands. Then she said in an entirely different tone, That little man's coming up the hill. Dr. Gérard looked over his shoulder. Ah, he comes in search of us, I think. Is he as much of a fool as he looks? Asked Sarah. Dr. Gérard said gravely, He is not a fool at all. I was afraid of that, said Sarah. With sombre eyes she watched the uphill progress of Hercule Poirot. He reached them at last, uttered a loud, Oof, and wiped his forehead. Then he looked sadly down at his patent leather shoes. Alas, he said, this donny country, my poor shoes. You can borrow Lady Westholme's shoe-cleaning apparatus, said Sarah unkindly, and her duster. She travels with a kind of patent housemaid's equipment. That will not remove the scratches, mademoiselle. Poirot shook his head sadly. Perhaps not. Why on earth do you wear shoes like that in this sort of country? I like to have the appearance soigné, Poirot said. I should give up trying for that in the desert, said Sarah. Women do not look their best in the desert, said Dr. Gérard dreamily. Miss King here, yes, she always looks neat and well turned out, but that Lady Westholme in her terrible, unbecoming riding breeches and boots, quelle horreur de femme! And the poor Miss Pierce, her clothes so limp like faded cabbage leaves. Sarah said restively, Well, I don't suppose Monsieur Poirot climbed up here to talk about clothes. True, said Poirot. I came to consult Dr. Gérard. His opinion should be of value to me, and yours too, mademoiselle. You are young and up-to-date in your psychology. I want to know all that you can tell me of Mrs. Boynton. I have a feeling, a certainty, that the mental equipment of Mrs. Boynton is very important in this case. Such types as hers are no doubt familiar to Dr. Gérard. From my point of view, she was certainly an interesting study, said the doctor. He described his interest in the family group, his conversation with Jefferson Cope, and the latter's complete misreading of the situation as a case of mistaken devotion. He had only the faintest notion of the underlying hate, rebellion, slavery, and misery. All the same, I think on the journey to Petra, Mr. Cope's eyes were being opened. And he described the conversation he'd had with the American on the morning of Mrs. Boynton's death. That is interesting, that story of a servant girl, said Poirot thoughtfully. It throws light on the old woman's methods. Gérard said, It was altogether a strange morning that. You have not been to Petra, Monsieur Poirot. If you go, you must certainly climb to the place of sacrifice. It has how shall I say, an atmosphere. He described the scene in detail, adding, Mademoiselle here sat like a young judge, speaking of the sacrifice of one to save many. You remember, Miss King? Sarah shivered. Don't let's talk of that day. No, said Poirot. Let us talk of events further back in the past. I am interested, Dr. Gérard, in your sketch of Mrs. Boynton's mentality. What I do not quite understand is this. Having brought her family into absolute subjection, why did Mrs. Boynton then arrange this trip abroad where surely there was danger of outside contacts and of her authority being weakened? Dr. Gérard leaned forward excitedly. That is just it. Old ladies are all the same all the world over. They get bored. If their speciality is playing patience, they sicken of the patience they know too well. They want to learn a new patience. And it is just the same with an old lady whose recreation is the dominating and tormenting of human creatures. Mrs. Boynton, to speak of her as une dompteuse, had tamed her tigers. Suddenly, all was stale, deadly dull. And so, she plans the voyage abroad. There will be the danger of her tamed beasts rebelling. There will be opportunities for inflicting fresh pain. It sounds absurd, does it not? But it was so. She wanted a new thrill. Poirot took a deep breath. It is perfect, that. Yes, I see exactly what you mean. It was so. It all fits in. She chose to live dangerously, La Maman Boynton, and she paid the penalty. You mean, Sarah said, that she drove her victims too far and they turned on her, or one of them did? Poirot bowed his head. Which of them? Poirot was saved from answering, for at that moment Gérard touched his shoulder and said, Look. A girl was wandering along the side of the hill. She moved with a strange rhythmic grace that somehow gave the impression that she was not quite real. The gold red of her hair shone in the sunlight. A secretive smile lifted the beautiful corners of her mouth. Poirot drew in his breath. He said, How beautiful! That is how Ophelia should be played. Like a young goddess straying from another world, happy because she has escaped out of the bondage of human joys and griefs. Yes, you are right, said Gérard. It is a phrase to dream of, is it not? I dreamt of it. In my fever I opened my eyes and saw that face, with its sweet, unearthly smile. It was a good dream. I was sorry to wake. Then, with a return to his commonplace manner, he said, That is Ginevra Boynton. In another minute, the girl had reached them. Dr. Gérard performed the introduction. Miss Boynton, this is Monsieur Hercule Poirot. Oh! She looked at him uncertainly. Her fingers joined together, twining themselves uneasily in and out. Poirot said, It is a piece of good fortune meeting you here, mademoiselle. Will you walk with me a little way? She moved with him docilely. Presently she said, You are a detective, aren't you? Yes, mademoiselle. She nodded to herself. You have come here to protect me? Poirot stroked his moustache thoughtfully. He said, Are you then in danger, mademoiselle? Yes. She looked round with a quick, suspicious glance. I told Dr. Gérard about it in Jerusalem. He was very clever. He gave no sign at the time, but he followed me to that terrible place with the red rocks. She shivered. They meant to kill me there. I have to be continually on my guard. Poirot nodded gently and indulgently. Ginevra Boynton said, He is kind and good. He is in love with me. Yes, said Poirot. Oh, yes. He says my name in his sleep. Her voice softened. I saw him lying there, turning and tossing and saying my name. I thought perhaps he had sent for you. I have a terrible lot of enemies, you know. They are all round me. Sometimes they are disguised. Poirot said gently, Was your mother's death a great shock to you, mademoiselle? Ginevra stamped her foot. She wasn't my mother. My enemies paid her to pretend she was and to see I did not escape. Where were you on the afternoon of her death? I was in the tent. It was hot in there, but I didn't dare come out. They might have got me. She gave a little quiver. One of them looked into my tent. He was disguised, but I knew him. I pretended to be asleep. The sheikh had sent him. The sheikh wanted to kidnap me, of course. For a few moments, Poirot walked in silence. Then he said, "They are very pretty, these histories you recount to yourself." She stopped and glared at him. "They're true. They're all true." "Yes," said Poirot. "They are certainly ingenious." Angrily, she turned from him and ran down the hillside. Poirot stood looking after Ginevra as she ran down the hillside. In a minute or two, he heard a voice close beside him. "What did you say to her?" Poirot turned to where Dr. Gérard stood, a little out of breath. Sarah was approaching at a more leisurely pace. Poirot answered Gérard's question. "I told her," he said, "that she had imagined to herself some pretty stories." The doctor nodded thoughtfully. "And she was angry? That is a good sign. It shows, you see, that she still knows that it is not the truth. I shall cure her." "Ah, you are undertaking a cure?" asked Poirot. "Yes. I have discussed the matter with young Mrs. Boynton and her husband. Ginevra will come to Paris and then to one of my clinics. Afterwards she will have her training for the stage." "The stage?" "Yes. There is a possibility there for her of great success," replied the doctor. "And that is what she needs, what she must have. In many essentials she has the same nature as her mother." "No!" cried Sarah, revolted. "Ah, it seems impossible to you, but certain fundamental traits are the same. They were both born with a great yearning for importance. They both demand that their personality shall impress." Then, with a little bow, Gérard murmured, "You will excuse me." And he hurried down the hill after the girl. Sarah said, "Dr. Gérard is tremendously keen on his job." "I perceive his keenness," said Poirot. Sarah said with a frown, "All the same, I can't bear his comparing her to that horrible old woman, although once I felt sorry for Mrs. Boynton myself." "When was that, mademoiselle?" "In Jerusalem. I suddenly felt as though I'd got the whole business wrong. You know that feeling when you see everything the other way round. I got all het up about it and went and made a fool of myself." Sarah was blushing acutely. "I felt all exalted, as though I had a mission. And then later, when Lady W. fixed a fishy eye on me and said she had seen me talking to Mrs. Boynton, I thought she'd probably overheard, and I felt the most complete ass." Poirot said, "And old Mrs. Boynton, what did she say to you? Can you remember the exact words?" "I think so. They made rather an impression on me. 'I never forget.' That's what she said. Remember that. I've never forgotten anything. Not an action, not a name, not a face." Sarah shivered. She said it so malevolently, not even looking at me. I feel as if, even now, I can hear her. She shivered again. "Monsieur Poirot, perhaps I ought not to ask, but have you come to a conclusion about this business? Have you found out anything definite?" "Yes." He saw her lips tremble as she asked, "What?" "I have found out to whom Raymond Boynton spoke that night in Jerusalem. It was to his sister Carol." "Carol? Of course," Poirot said quietly. "He told me that it was a hysterical outburst, no more." "I see. Miss Sarah, will you not tell me what it is you fear?" Sarah turned a white, despairing face upon him. "That afternoon, we were together, and he left me, saying he wanted to do something now while he had the courage. I thought he meant just to tell her, but supposing he meant—" Her voice died away. She stood rigid, fighting for control. Nadine Boynton came out of the hotel. As she hesitated uncertainly, a waiting figure sprang forward. Mr. Jefferson Cope was immediately at his lady's side. "Shall we walk up this way? I think it's the pleasantest." She acquiesced. Her face had grown pale. "Jefferson, I've got to talk to you," she said. "Why, certainly, my dear, anything you like, but don't distress yourself." She said, "You know, don't you, what I'm going to say?" "It is undoubtedly true," said Mr. Cope, "that circumstances alter cases. I do feel very profoundly that in the present circumstances decisions may have to be reconsidered." He sighed. "Things are different now. You and Lennox can lead a life of your own." Nadine said quietly, "Yes, I can't leave Lennox. Please forgive me." "Nothing to forgive," declared Mr. Cope. "You and I will go back to being old friends. We'll just forget about that afternoon." Nadine placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Dear Jefferson, thank you. I'm going to find Lennox now." She turned and left him. Mr. Cope went on, alone. Nadine found Lennox sitting at the top of the Greco-Roman theatre. He was in such a brown study that he hardly noticed her till she sank breathless at his side. "Lennox." "Nadine." He half turned. She said, "We haven't been able to talk until now, but you know, don't you, that I'm not leaving you." He said gravely, "Did you ever really mean to, Nadine?" She nodded. "Yes. You see, it seemed to be the only possible thing left to do. I hoped that you would come after me." Lennox mused a minute, then he said, "When you told me that afternoon, it was just like being hit on the head. I walked back, half dazed, and then suddenly I saw what a damn fool I'd been. I realized that there was only one thing to be done if I didn't want to lose you." He felt her stiffen. His tone became grimmer. "I went and—" "Don't!" she cried. He gave her a quick glance. "I went and argued with her. I told her that I had to choose between her and you, and that I chose you." There was a pause. He repeated in a tone of curious self-approval, "Yes, that's what I said to her." On his way home, Poirot met Miss Pierce. She greeted him breathlessly. "Oh, Monsieur Poirot, I'm so glad to see you. I didn't really take in this morning who you were. Of course you are that very famous detective." Poirot murmured something. Miss Pierce went on with growing agitation. "One must tell everything, must one not? Even the smallest detail, however unrelated it may seem. And of course, if you are mixed up in this, poor Mrs. Boynton must have been murdered." She clasped her hands tightly together and continued, "It's only that on the next morning I saw that Boynton girl come out of her tent and fling something which glittered right out into the stream." "Which Boynton girl was it?" asked Poirot. "I think it was the one they call Carol," said Miss Pierce. "I didn't think much of it at the time, but later I walked along the stream and Miss King was there, and there, amongst a lot of other very unsuitable things, I saw a little bright metal box, and just out of curiosity I picked it up and opened it. It had a kind of syringe inside, and I thought how curious to throw it away like that, because it didn't seem broken or anything, but just as I was wondering, Miss King said, 'Oh, thank you, that's my hypodermic. I was coming to look for it.' So I gave it to her, and she went back to the camp with it." Poirot's face was grave. "Thank you, mademoiselle. What you have told me may not be important in itself, but I will tell you this. It completes my case. Everything is now clear and in order." Hercule Poirot contemplated his arrangement of one of the unoccupied hotel bedrooms. "My preparations are complete," he said. Colonel Carberry smiled to himself as he puffed at his pipe. "It is time to commence our proceedings," Poirot continued. "You, mon colonel, will sit here behind this table in an official position. Here we place la famille Boynton. And over here we will place the three outsiders who have a definite stake in the case. Dr. Gerard, Miss Sarah King, and Mr. Jefferson Cope." He broke off. "Aha, here they come." He opened the door to admit the party. Lennox and Nadine Boynton came in first. Raymond and Carol followed. Ginevra walked by herself. Dr. Gerard and Sarah King brought up the rear. Mr. Jefferson Cope was a few minutes late and came in with an apology. When he had taken his place, Poirot stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "this is an entirely informal gathering. It has come about through the accident of my presence in Armagh. Colonel Carberry did me the honor to consult me," Carberry said. "I gave Monsieur Poirot full authority to make any investigations he pleased. We are assembled here now to hear his report on the matter." There was a silence so acute that you could have heard a pin drop. Actually, someone did drop what was probably a shoe in the next room. It sounded like a bomb in the hushed atmosphere. Poirot said, "First, I examined the possibility of Mrs. Boynton having died a natural death, and I decided against it. The missing drug, the hypodermic syringe that vanished and then reappeared, and above all, the attitude of the Boynton family all convinced me that that supposition could not be entertained. Not only was Mrs. Boynton killed in cold blood, but every member of her family was aware of the fact. Collectively, they reacted as guilty parties." He paused. "The facts seem to suggest that one or possibly two members of the family had acted in collusion, and that the others were accessories after the fact. I next considered which particular member or members were indicated. Here I was inclined to be biased by a certain piece of evidence." Poirot recounted his experience in Jerusalem. Naturally, that pointed very strongly to Mr. Raymond Boynton as the prime mover in the affair. He had been heard to discuss the possibility of taking Mrs. Boynton's life, and he was in a condition of great nervous excitement. That is the psychology. Let us now examine the facts. Raymond Boynton left the camp with the others about 3:15. Mrs. Boynton was then alive and well. Before long, Raymond and Sarah King had a tete-a-tete interview. Then he left her. According to him, he returned to the camp. He says that at 6:10, Mrs. Boynton was alive and well, but we now come to a fact which directly contradicts that statement. Miss King examined the body at 6:30, and she swears definitely that death had most certainly taken place at least an hour and probably a good deal more before 6 o'clock. We have here, you see, two conflicting statements, which means that either Miss King or Mr. Boynton is lying. Let us examine Raymond Boynton's reasons for so doing. What then was the sequence of events? Raymond Boynton returns to the camp, sees his mother sitting at the mouth of the cave, goes up to her and finds she is dead. What does he do? Does he call for help? Does he immediately inform the camp of what has happened? No. He waits a minute or two, then joins his family in the marquee and says nothing. Such contact is exceedingly curious, is it not? Raymond said in a nervous, sharp voice, "It would be idiotic, of course. That ought to show you that my mother was alive and well, as I've said." "One asks oneself," said Poirot calmly, sweeping on, "whether there could be a reason for such conduct. Now, supposing Raymond Boynton comes back from his walk and finds his mother dead. Tout simplement, he suspects that his sister, Carol Boynton, is guilty." "It's a lie," said Raymond. Poirot went on, "Let us now take the possibility of Carol Boynton being the murderess. She returned to camp at 5:10. According to her own story, she went up and spoke to her mother. The camp was deserted. There was no witness of Carol Boynton's possible action. The time would agree well enough. The case, then, against Carol Boynton is a perfectly possible one." He paused. Carol had raised her head. Her eyes looked steadily and sorrowfully into his. "There is one other point," Poirot continued. "Early the following morning, Carol Boynton was seen to throw something into the stream. There is reason to believe that that something was a hypodermic syringe." "Comment?" Dr. Gerard looked up surprised. "But my hypodermic was returned." Poirot nodded vigorously. Yes, this second hypodermic, it is very curious, very interesting. I have been given to understand that this hypodermic belonged to Miss King. Is that so?" Carol spoke quickly. "It was not Miss King's syringe," she said. "It was mine." "Then you admit throwing it away, mademoiselle?" She hesitated just a second. "Yes, of course. Why shouldn't I?" "Carol." It was Nadine. "I don't understand." Carol turned and looked at her. "There's nothing to understand. I threw away an old hypodermic. I never touched the poison." Sarah broke in. "It is quite true what Miss Pearce told you, Monsieur Poirot. It was my syringe." Poirot smiled. "It is very confusing, this affair of the hypodermic. And yet, I think, it could be explained. Ah, well, we have two cases made out. The case for the innocence of Raymond Boynton, the case for the guilt of his sister Carol. But me, I am scrupulously fair. Let us examine what occurred if Carol Boynton was innocent. She returns to the camp. She goes up to her stepmother and finds her dead. What is the first thing she will think? She will suspect that her brother Raymond may have killed her. She does not know what to do, so she says nothing. Perhaps she goes to his tent and finds there a hypodermic syringe. Then, indeed, she is sure. She takes it, and early in the morning she flings it as far away as she can. Eh bien, that is the case for the innocence of Carol Boynton. Now, let us consider not the innocence but the possible guilt of Raymond. We can suppose that he killed his mother at 6:10 when he went up to speak to her. The light was fading. It might have been managed. But it then follows that Miss King lied. Remember, she came back to the camp only 10 minutes after Raymond. From the distance, she would see him go up to his mother. When later she is found dead, Miss King realizes that Raymond has killed her, and to save him, she lies, knowing that Dr. Gerard is down with fever and cannot expose her lie. "I did not lie," said Sarah clearly. "There is yet another possibility," Poirot continued. "Miss King reached the camp a few minutes after Raymond. If Raymond Boynton found his mother alive, it may have been Miss King who administered the fatal injection. She believed that Mrs. Boynton was fundamentally evil. She may well have seen herself as a just executioner. That would equally well explain her lying about the time of death." Sarah had grown very pale. She spoke in a low, steady voice. "It is true that I spoke of the expediency of one person dying to save many. It was the place of sacrifice that suggested the idea to me, but I can swear that I never harmed that disgusting old woman, nor would the idea of doing so ever have entered my head." "And yet," said Poirot softly, "one of you two must be lying." Raymond Boynton shifted in his chair. He cried out impetuously, "You win, Monsieur Poirot. I'm the liar. Mother was dead when I went up to her. And I thought just what you said. But Carol, you see, there was the mark on her wrist." Poirot said quickly, "That is the point on which I am not completely informed. What was the method you counted on employing? It was connected with a hypodermic syringe, that much I know. If you want me to believe you, you must tell me the rest." Raymond said, I read it in a book. You stuck an empty hypodermic syringe into someone and it did the trick. It sounded perfectly scientific. I thought we'd do it that way." "Ah," said Poirot, "I comprehend. And you purchased a syringe?" "No. As a matter of fact, I pinched Nadine's." Poirot shot a quick look at her. "The syringe that is in your baggage in Jerusalem," he murmured. A faint color showed in the young woman's face. I wasn't sure what had become of it," she said. Poirot bowed. "You are quick-witted, madame," he said. There was a pause. Then Poirot went on, "We have now solved the mystery of what I might term the second hypodermic. That belonged to Mrs. Lennox Boynton, was taken by Raymond Boynton before leaving Jerusalem, was taken from Raymond by Carol after the discovery of Mrs. Boynton's dead body, was thrown away by her, found by Miss Pierce, and claimed by Miss King as hers. I presume Miss King has it now. I have, said Sarah. So, that when you said it was yours just now, you were doing what you told us you do not do. You told a lie. Sarah said calmly, That's different. It isn't a professional lie. Gerard nodded appreciation. I understand you perfectly, mademoiselle, he said. Poirot cleared his throat. There is, you will notice, a gap of 20 minutes between 4:50 when Nadine Boynton left her mother-in-law and 5:10 when Carol returned. Therefore, if Carol is speaking the truth and found her stepmother dead, Mrs. Boynton must have been killed in that 20 minutes. Now, who could have killed her? At that time, Miss King and Raymond Boynton were together. Mr. Cope was with Lady Westholme and Miss Pierce. Lennox Boynton was with his wife in the marquee. Dr. Gerard was groaning with fever in his tent. The camp was deserted. The boys were asleep. It is a suitable moment for a crime. Was there a person who could have committed it? His eyes went thoughtfully to Ginevra Boynton. There was one person. Ginevra Boynton was in her tent all the afternoon, so we have been told. But actually, there is evidence that she was not in her tent all the time. Ginevra Boynton made a very significant remark. She said that Dr. Gerard spoke her name in his fever. And Dr. Gerard has also told us that he dreamt in his fever of Ginevra Boynton's face. But it was not a dream. It was the truth. Ginevra was in Dr. Gerard's tent. Is it not possible that she had come to put back the hypodermic syringe after using it? Ginevra raised her head. Her wide, beautiful eyes stared expressionlessly at Poirot. She looked like a vague saint. Ah, ça non, cried Dr. Gerard. What you say is nonsense, absurd. Delusions of persecution? Murmured Poirot. Yes, but not in that way. A dagger, yes, something dramatic, something flamboyant, spectacular. Never this cool, calm logic. Nadine Boynton said sharply, It's quite impossible. Poirot's eyes came quickly round to her. Impossible, madame? Yes. She bit her lip, then went on, We all know it to be impossible. The eyes that met Poirot's were hard and unflinching. He leaned forward. Madame is very intelligent, he said. What do you mean by that, Monsieur Poirot? I mean, madame, that all along you have envisaged the situation calmly and collectedly. Some time ago you realized that the only chance for your husband's happiness was for him to leave home, to strike out on his own, no matter how difficult and penurious such a life might be. You were willing to take all risks, and you endeavored to influence him to make that effort. But you failed, madame. Lennox Boynton had no longer the will to try for freedom. He was content to sink into a condition of apathy and melancholy. There was one last desperate throw. You could go away with another man. But let us suppose that even that remedy failed. Your husband was terribly upset at your decision, but he did not, as you had hoped, react with an uprush of the possessive instinct. There was only one thing that could save your husband from his own rapidly failing mental condition. If his stepmother were to die, it might not be too late. He might be able to start life anew. Poirot paused, then repeated gently, If your mother-in-law were to die. Nadine's eyes were still fixed on him. In an unmoved voice she said, You are suggesting that I helped to bring that event about, are you not? But you cannot do so, Monsieur Poirot. After I had broken the news of my impending departure to Mrs. Boynton, I went straight to the marquee and joined Lennox. I did not leave it again until my mother-in-law was found dead. If, as you say, she was deliberately killed, then I had no opportunity of doing so. Poirot said, You did not leave the Marquis again until your mother-in-law was found dead. That, Mrs. Boynton, was one of the points I found curious about this case. What do you mean? At 6:30, when dinner was ready, a servant was dispatched to announce the fact to Mrs. Boynton. Why a servant? All of you were most assiduous in your attendance on the old lady as a general rule. You, madame, did perhaps more waiting on her than anyone else, but that evening you did not offer to go out to help her. Why? That is what I ask myself. Why? And I tell you my answer. Because you knew quite well that she was dead. No, do not interrupt me. He raised an impassioned hand. Listen to me, madame. There were witnesses to your conversation with your mother-in-law, witnesses who could see but could not hear. Lady Westham and Miss Pierce saw you apparently having a conversation with your mother-in-law, but what actual evidence is there of what occurred? I will propound to you instead a little theory. You are brains, madame. Let us say you have decided on the elimination of your husband's mother. You will carry it out with intelligence and with due preparation. You have access to Dr. Gerard's tent during his absence on the morning excursion. You are fairly sure that you will find a suitable drug. Your nursing training helps you there. You choose digitoxin, the same kind of drug that the old lady is taking. You also take his hypodermic syringe, since your own has disappeared. You hope to replace the syringe before the doctor notices its absence. Mrs. Boynton's death, you are sure, will be put down to heart trouble. It will indeed be due to heart trouble. It was to a dead woman that you sat talking. Unfortunately, you cannot return the syringe to Dr. Gerard's tent because the doctor is in there, shivering with malaria. And although you do not know it, he has already missed the syringe. That, madame, was the flaw in an otherwise perfect crime. There was silence. Then Lennox Boynton sprang to his feet. No, he shouted. That's a damn lie. Nadine did nothing. She couldn't have done anything. My mother was already dead. Ah? Poirot's eyes came gently round to him. So, after all, it was you who killed her, Mr. Boynton. Lennox dropped back into his chair and raised trembling hands to his face. Yes, I killed her. You took the digitoxin from Dr. Gerard's tent? And the syringe? Lennox nodded. When? In the morning. Why did you kill her? Poirot asked. But you know, my wife was leaving me with Cope. But you only learned that in the afternoon, Poirot said. Yet you took the poison in the morning, before you knew? Poirot paused. I advise you to tell me the truth, Mr. Lennox. By God, I will, Lennox said suddenly. That afternoon, when I left Nadine, I was absolutely all to pieces. Poirot nodded. I noted Lady Westham's description of your gait when you passed her. That is why I knew your wife was not speaking the truth when she said she told you after you were both back at the camp. Continue, Mr. Boynton. As I got near the camp, my brain seemed to clear, Lennox said. I had only myself to blame. I ought to have defied my stepmother and cleared out years ago. I went straight up to have it out with her, and she was dead. Sitting there, dead. I didn't know what to do. I was dazed. Mechanically, I picked up her wristwatch. It was lying in her lap, and put it round her wrist, her horrid, dead wrist. Then I stumbled down and went into the marquee and just sat there, waiting. Poirot said, I had already noted the little fact that Mr. Boynton had replaced his mother's wristwatch. That was capable of two explanations. It might have been a cover for the actual deed, or it might have been observed and misinterpreted by Mrs. Boynton. She returned only 5 minutes after her husband. She must have seen that action. When she reached her mother-in-law and found her dead with the mark of a hypodermic syringe on her wrist, she would naturally jump to the conclusion that her husband had committed the deed as a result of her announcement of her decision to leave him. Briefly, Nadine Boynton believed that she had inspired her husband to commit murder. He looked at Nadine. "That is so, madame?" She bowed her head. Then she leaned forward. "And now, what really happened, Monsieur Poirot?" "What really happened?" Poirot repeated. "That is a question, is it not? For the digitoxin was taken, the syringe was missing, there was the mark of a hypodermic on Mrs. Boynton's wrist. In a few days' time we shall know definitely from the autopsy whether Mrs. Boynton died of an overdose of digitalis or not. But then it may be too late. It would be better to reach the truth tonight while the murderer is here, under our hand." Nadine raised her head sharply. "You mean that you still believe that one of us, here in this room?" Her voice died away. Poirot was slowly nodding to himself. "The truth, that is what I promised Colonel Carberry. Bien. Earlier in the day, writing a list of facts, I was faced straight away with two glaring inconsistencies. Mrs. Boynton was taking a mixture of digitalis, and Dr. Gerard missed a hypodermic syringe. Take those facts and set them against the undeniable fact that the Boynton family showed unmistakably guilty reactions. It would seem, therefore, certain that one of them must have committed the crime. And yet, those two facts I mentioned were all against the theory. It is a clever idea to use a concentrated solution of digitalis because Mrs. Boynton was already taking the drug, but what would a member of her family do then? Ha, ma foi, there was only one sensible thing to do. Put the poison into her bottle of medicine. That is what anyone with a grain of sense and who had access to the medicine would certainly do. Why then, the theft of the hypodermic needle? There can be only two explanations. Either Dr. Gerard overlooked the syringe and it was never stolen, or else the syringe was taken because the murderer had not got access to the medicine. That is to say, the murderer was not a member of the Boynton family. Those two first facts point overwhelmingly to an outsider as having committed the crime. Poirot paused. There are three people in this room who are technically outsiders, but who have a definite connection with the case. Mr. Cope has been closely associated with the Boynton family for some time. Can we discover motive and opportunity on his part? It seems not. Mrs. Boynton's death has affected him adversely, since it has brought about the frustration of certain hopes. We come now to Miss King. Miss King had a certain amount of motive. She had the necessary medical knowledge, and she is a person of character and determination, but since she left the camp before 3:30 with Dr. Gerard and did not return to it until 6 o'clock, it is difficult to see where she could have got her opportunity. Next, we must consider Dr. Gerard. There is no one to say what his movements were when he returned to the camp. Therefore, it is perfectly possible for Dr. Gerard to have committed the crime. There is a possible motive. He might have wished to save a certain person whose reason was in danger, and he may have considered the sacrifice of an old and worn-out life worth it. But if so, why did Gerard call attention to the possibility of foul play? But for his statement to Colonel Carberry, Mrs. Boynton's death would have been put down to natural causes. It was Dr. Gerard who first pointed out the possibility of murder. That, my friends, said Poirot, does not make common sense. Doesn't seem to, said Colonel Carberry gruffly. Poirot smiled. Come, he said, we have still a little way to go. We have taken the facts, we have held the evidence. There remains the psychology. And it is the psychology of Mrs. Boynton herself that is the most important thing in this case. Mrs. Boynton took a definite pleasure in keeping her family from enjoying themselves with other people. Mrs. Boynton, on the afternoon in question, encouraged her family to go away and leave her. These two facts words. They contradict each other flatly. Why, on this particular afternoon, should Mrs. Boynton suddenly display a complete reversal of her usual policy? Let us, if we can, think ourselves into the mental condition of Mrs. Boynton. A human creature born with immense ambition, with a yearning to dominate and to impress her personality on other people. But, in the end, what did it amount to? She was not a great power. She was not feared and hated over a wide area. She was the petty tyrant of one isolated family. And by coming abroad, she realized for the first time how extremely insignificant she was. Now we come to the words spoken to Sarah King in Jerusalem. Sarah King, you see, had revealed fully and uncompromisingly the pitiful futility of Mrs. Boynton's scheme of existence. Listen very carefully to her exact words to Miss King. Miss King has said that Mrs. Boynton spoke so malevolently, not even looking at me. And this is what she actually said. I've never forgotten anything. Not an action, not a name, not a face. Those words made a great impression on Miss King. Their extraordinary intensity and the loud, hoarse tone in which they were uttered. But she quite failed to realize their extraordinary significance. Mes amis, does it escape you that those words were not a reasonable answer at all to what Miss King had just been saying? It does not make sense. If Mrs. Boynton had said, I never forget impertinence, or something of that kind, but no. A face is what she said. Ah, cried Poirot, beating his hands together, but it leaps to the eye. Those words, ostensibly spoken to Miss King, were not meant for Miss King at all. They were addressed to someone else standing behind Miss King. He looked at their rapt faces. That was, I tell you, a psychological moment in Mrs. Boynton's life. She had been exposed to herself by an intelligent young woman. She was full of baffled fury, and at that moment she recognized somewhat, a face from the past, a victim delivered into her hands. We are back to the outsider. And now, the meaning of Mrs. Boynton's unexpected amiability on the afternoon of her death is clear. She wanted to get rid of her family because she had other fish to fry. She wanted the field left clear for an interview with a new victim. From that standpoint, let us now consider the events of the afternoon. The Boynton family go off. Mrs. Boynton sits up by her cave. Now, let us consider very carefully the evidence of Lady Westholme and Miss Pierce. The latter is an unreliable witness. She is unobservant and very suggestible. Lady Westholme, on the other hand, is perfectly clear as to her facts and meticulously observant. Both ladies agree on one fact. An Arab, one of the servants, approaches Mrs. Boynton, angers her in some way, and retires hastily. Lady Westholme stated definitely that the servant had first been into the tent occupied by Ginevra Boynton. But you may remember that Dr. Gérard's tent was next door to Ginevra's. It is possible that it was his tent the Arab entered. Poirot glanced around at his audience. Both ladies agreed that they could not see the Arab's face clearly enough to identify him, and that they did not hear what was said. That is understandable. The distance between the Marquis and the ledge was about 200 yards. Lady Westholme gave a clear description of the man otherwise, describing in detail his ragged breeches and the untidiness with which his puttees were rolled. Poirot leaned forward. And that, my friends, was very odd indeed, because if she could not see his face or hear what was said, she could not possibly have noticed the state of his breeches and puttees, not at 200 yards. It was an error, that. It suggested a curious idea to me. Why insist so on the ragged breeches and untidy puttees? Could it be because the breeches were not torn and the puttees were non-existent? Lady Westholme and Miss Pierce both saw the man, but from where they were sitting they could not see each other. That is shown by the fact that Lady Westholme came to see if Miss Pierce was awake and found her sitting in the entrance of her tent. "Good Lord," said Colonel Carberry, suddenly sitting up very straight. "Are you suggesting—" "I am suggesting that, having ascertained just what Miss Pierce was doing, Lady Westholme returned to her tent, put on her breeches, boots, and khaki-coloured coat, made herself an Arab headdress with her checked duster and a skein of knitting wool, and that, thus attired, she went into Dr. Gerard's tent, looked in his medicine chest, selected a suitable drug, took the hypodermic, filled it, and went boldly up to her victim. Mrs. Boynton may have been dozing. Lady Westholme was quick. She caught her by the wrist and injected the stuff. Mrs. Boynton cried out. The Arab hurried away with every evidence of being ashamed and abashed. Mrs. Boynton shook her stick, tried to rise, then fell back into her chair. 5 minutes later, Lady Westholme rejoins Miss Pierce and comments on the scene Miss Pierce has just witnessed, impressing her own version of it on the other. Then they go for a walk, pausing below the ledge where Lady Westholme shouts up to the old lady. She receives no answer. Of course not. Mrs. Boynton is dead. But she remarks to Miss Pierce, "Very rude to snuff at us like that." Miss Pierce accepts the suggestion. The only point where her plan went astray was the replacing of the syringe. Dr. Gerard returning so soon upset her scheme, but she hoped he might not have noticed his absence and put it back during the night. He stopped. Sarah said, "But why? Why should Lady Westholme want to kill old Mrs. Boynton? Did you not tell me that Lady Westholme had been quite near you in Jerusalem when you spoke to Mrs. Boynton? It was to Lady Westholme that Mrs. Boynton's words were addressed. I've never forgotten anything, not an action, not a name, not a face. Put that with the fact that Mrs. Boynton had been a wardress in a prison, and you can get a very shrewd idea of the truth. Lord Westholme met his wife on a voyage back from America. Lady Westholme, before her marriage, had been a criminal and had served a prison sentence. You see the terrible dilemma she was in. Her career, her ambitions, her social position, all at stake. And Mrs. Boynton was no ordinary blackmailer. She did not want money. She wanted the pleasure of torturing her victim for a while, and then revealing the truth in the most spectacular fashion. No. While Mrs. Boynton lived, Lady Westholme was not safe. She saw her chance and carried it out boldly. She only made 2 slips. One was to say a little too much, the description of the torn breeches which first drew my attention to her, and the other was when she mistook Dr. Gerard's tent and looked first into the one where Ginevra was lying half asleep. Hence the girl's story, half make-believe, half true, of a sheikh in disguise. She over-dramatized it, of course, but the indication was quite significant enough for me. He paused. But we shall soon know. If Lady Westholme's fingerprints are sent to the prison where Mrs. Boynton was once a wardress, we shall know the truth when they are compared with the files. He stopped. In the momentary stillness, a sharp sound was heard. "What's that?" asked Dr. Gerard. "Sounded like a shot to me," said Colonel Carberry, rising quickly to his feet. "In the next room. Who's got that room, by the way?" Poirot murmured, "I have a little idea. It is the room of Lady Westholme." On a warm June evening, 5 years later, Sarah Boynton and her husband sat in the stalls of a London theatre. The play was Hamlet. Sarah gripped Raymond's arm as Ophelia's words came floating over the footlights. "He is dead and gone, lady. He is dead and gone. At his head a grass-green turf. At his heels a stone." Sarah said with decision as the curtain fell at the end of the act, "Ginny's a great actress, a great, great actress." Later they sat round a supper table at the Savoy. Ginevra's smiling, remote, turned to the bearded man by her side. "I was good, wasn't I, Theodore?" "You were wonderful, chérie." "You always believed in me. You always knew I could do great things, sway multitudes," she murmured. Nadine, sitting opposite Ginevra, said, "A regular family party." Then she said to Lennox, "I think the children might go to the matinee, don't you? They do so want to see Aunt Ginny out on the stage." Lennox, a sane, happy-looking Lennox with humorous eyes, lifted his glass. "To the newlyweds, Mr. and Mrs. Cope." Jefferson Cope and Carol acknowledged the toast. A dapper figure stopped by their table. Hercule Poirot, faultless and beautifully apparelled, his moustaches proudly twisted, bowed regally. "Mademoiselle," he said to Ginevra, "mes hommages. You were superb." They greeted him affectionately, made a place for him beside Sarah. He beamed round on them all, and when the rest were talking, he said softly to Sarah, "Eh bien, it seems that all marches well now with La Famille Boynton." "Thanks to you," said Sarah. She looked across the table at Ginny, at the lovely face and red gold crown of hair. For a moment, her face was grave. She raised her glass slowly to her lips. "You drink a toast, madame?" asked Poirot. Sarah said slowly, "I thought suddenly of her." Looking at Ginny, I saw for the first time the likeness. The same thing, only Ginny is in light, where she was in darkness. And from opposite, Ginevra said unexpectedly, "Poor mother. Now that we're all so happy, I feel kind of sorry for her. She didn't get what she wanted out of life. It must have been tough for her." Almost without a pause, she moved softly into the lines from Cymbeline, while the others listened, spellbound. "Fear no more the heat of the sun, nor the furious winter's rages. Thou thy worldly task hast done, home art gone, and ta'en thy wages." End of Appointment with Death by Agatha Christie. Read by Bo McKenna.